Hello everyone, welcome to another Paranormal M video. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight. Before we start, if you like the stories in this video, please give it a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Our first story is about someone who says strange things have been happening around their house for years, but they always found a way to explain it off. That is, until the experiences started getting harder and harder to make sense of. So with that said, let's get into the first story, and I hope you sleep well tonight. I've never really been the kind of person who gets into ghost stories. Honestly, I avoid horror movies altogether because even a cheap jump scare is enough to ruin my night. But lately, the things happening in my house have started to make me wonder if there's something here I can't explain. For more than a decade now, weird little things have been happening with the electronics around my house. Lights flicking on or off, devices acting up for no clear reason, stuff like that. For years, I brushed it off. I figured maybe it was some kind of interference, like a neighbor's remote, or just old wiring doing strange things. It felt easy enough to explain away. Then one night, my girlfriend Maya was over. She was sitting beside me in a chair, working on an assignment, and I was at my desk on my computer. Out of nowhere, a can of iced tea that was still pretty full just slid across the desk by itself. Not tipped over, not rolled, just slid. We both turned and saw it at the exact same moment. After that, I spent several minutes trying to recreate it, pushing the can from different spots, checking the surface, everything. The desk was flat, and there was no way it should have moved like that without spilling. It didn't make sense, but at the time, I still told myself it was just one of those weird things. Then there are my dogs. I have two of them, and every so often at night they'll suddenly start barking like something has really set them off. At first, I assumed it was just noise outside. There are always people around the neighborhood, kids running around late, that kind of thing. But one night, it went on long enough that I decided to quietly go check on them without calling attention to myself. I came upstairs expecting to find them at the window or by the front door, but instead, both of them were standing frozen at the entrance to the kitchen. The whole kitchen was completely dark, and it was around midnight. They were staring straight into it, growling and barking like they were focused on something very specific. They didn't even notice me walk up behind them, which is unusual by itself. When I turned the kitchen light on, both of them looked up at me almost like they were confused, like whatever had their attention was suddenly gone. What really got to me was the growling. My dogs are not aggressive. I had never heard that sound from them before. One of them had the fur raised along the back of her neck. I didn't see anything in that room, and I didn't hear anything either. But they were reacting to something. The part that's really been getting under my skin, though, is something I started seeing more recently. Every now and then, I'll catch sight of this strange, greenish shape, kind of like a misty glow, about the size of a small ball. It's transparent, almost smoky. And the weirdest part is that it never seems to come toward me. It always seems to move away. What I mean is, if I'm heading downstairs, I'll catch a glimpse of it going up the other staircase. If I'm going upstairs, I'll see it drifting down the opposite side. It feels less like it's following me, and more like it's deliberately avoiding me. That somehow makes it even stranger. At this point, I've started leaving lights on around the house all the time. I even bought lower wattage bulbs so I wouldn't feel as bad doing it. When I'm home alone now, I catch myself not wanting to turn around too quickly, like I'm nervous about what I might see behind me. And then there are the smells. That's another thing I can't explain. Every so often, I'll suddenly notice a scent in the house that absolutely should not be there. Sometimes it smells like tobacco or cigars, even though no one here smokes. Other times it's something unfamiliar that I can't even identify. And my bedroom, for some reason, will randomly smell intensely like oranges, Not faintly either. I mean overwhelmingly, like someone tore open a huge pile of fresh orange peels and left them all over the room. I don't use citrus candles, sprays, cleaners, nothing. There's no reason for that smell to be there, but when it happens, it's strong. So that's where I'm at now. I've spent a long time trying to explain all of this away as coincidences, bad timing, weird house stuff, anything practical. But when you pile all of it together, it starts to feel like something is off. I still don't know what to call it. I don't know if that green mist is supposed to be some kind of spirit, or if there's another explanation entirely. I just know that whatever's happening in this house doesn't feel random anymore. So, I work at a Goodwill in southern Massachusetts, and this happened around 8:30 at night, in the middle of winter. It was one of those cold, dry evenings where everything outside feels still. No rain, no snow, nothing dramatic, just quiet. We were getting close to closing when my assistant manager, Mara, happened to glance at the security cameras and noticed this dark figure moving around near the little hallway by the bathrooms. She asked me to check the monitor with her because she thought she saw something shift. At first, I honestly didn't catch anything. Then suddenly, I saw it. It came out of the customer bathroom and darted across the hall, like it was trying to stay out of sight, and slipped behind this folded table we had leaning against the wall. At that point, we asked the store manager to come take a look, because we wanted to make absolutely sure there wasn't somehow still a customer in the building. He went out with Mara to check the bathroom, and I stayed in the office watching the cameras. He knocked on the bathroom door, opened it, and stepped inside to look around. While he was doing that, I saw the figure again on the monitor, and for a second I thought it was Mara. But then I noticed she was still standing a few feet away near the back room door. That was the moment my stomach just dropped. After they checked the bathroom, I watched my manager suddenly run toward the back wall of the building, into the linen section, peering between and underneath the racks like he had seen someone duck in there. From where I was watching, though, I couldn't make sense of it. I didn't see anyone at all. I figured maybe he was just being thorough and checking every possible hiding spot. Then both of them moved to the front of the store, turned on more lights, and checked behind the registers and all the other places someone could crouch down and hide. My manager went back again to look through the linen racks, and then he stopped near the front door. A little later, the lights were turned back off, and they both came back to the office to ask if I'd seen anyone on the cameras. I didn't tell them right away about the figure, because I wasn't sure whether my store manager believed in anything paranormal, and I didn't want to sound ridiculous. But then he told me he thought he'd seen someone hiding in the linen racks, and right after that, he heard knocking on the back glass door. He wanted to show both of us exactly where he'd seen it and which door the sound came from. So he started testing the doors, checking whether maybe one had shifted open or whether wind could have caused the noise. Then he knocked on the glass himself after moving the door around a little, and sure enough, that was the exact same sound. Even after figuring that part out, none of us felt better. We were all already too shaken. So we decided the closing tasks were done, we were finished for the night, and we were leaving. Nobody wanted to stay in that building any longer than necessary. I ended up being the last one left to clock out, and of course, that's when the digital punch-in system started glitching and wouldn't accept my clock out. Standing there alone while that thing kept messing up was just about enough to send me over the edge. Later, I found out my store manager actually does believe in the paranormal and has had a lot of experiences before. He's the kind of person who usually doesn't scare easily at all, so seeing him genuinely rattled made everything feel even worse. Mara has had experiences too, and we've talked before about some strange things we've both had happen. What really gets to me is that most days I'm opening or closing the store with just one other person, and that person is usually in the back room sorting donations. So I'm the one walking through the dark store, turning on lights, starting the music, and cleaning up whatever got left behind the night before. After what happened, I was seriously debating whether I could even make myself go in for my opening shift the next morning. And because of store rules, I can't do anything like burn sage or incense or put salt by the doors, even if I wanted to. So I've just been sitting with this feeling, wondering how to make myself and the rest of the staff feel safe at work again. Whatever that was, it terrified me. And more than anything, I just wanted it to stop bothering us and go back to whatever normal had been before. So, bear with me. I'm not the best storyteller in the world, but this is something that happened to me years ago, and it still unsettles me when I think about it. I was 18 at the time, living with my grandparents. They were deeply religious, and I was getting ready to be baptized, so faith was a huge part of my life back then. The dream started with me sitting on an old porch swing beside this big cardboard box. My father had told me to give it to a man when he arrived. After a while, this man walked up wearing a long dark coat and a black hat. He asked for the box, and as I handed it over, the bottom gave out and everything spilled across the porch. It was hundreds of photographs. I dropped down, scrambling to gather them, and that's when I realized they weren't just random pictures. They were moments from my childhood. Some looked like actual photos I'd seen before, and others felt more like captured memories, little pieces of my life laid out in front of me. Then I looked up at my dad, and he was crying. He just said, "I'm sorry." And somehow I understood. He was giving away my memories, handing over pieces of my childhood to this stranger. While I was picking them up, I slipped one photo into my pocket, hoping he wouldn't notice. Once everything had been gathered and handed back, the man started walking away. But when he reached the end of the path, he stopped and turned around like he knew. Like he knew I had kept one. The next second, he was on me. He moved so fast it didn't feel human. And then I was in my bed. I was awake, or at least I thought I was. But my eyes were squeezed shut and I couldn't move. I felt this horrible presence hovering right above me, so close it was like the air itself had turned heavy. I wanted to open my eyes, but I was completely frozen. And more than that, I was terrified that if I looked, I'd see something I could never unsee. It felt like pure darkness was hanging over me, like if I met its gaze, something in me would be lost forever. That sounds dramatic, I know, but in that moment, that was the fear. It was absolute. My chest felt tight, my whole body felt trapped, and there was this awful tension between wanting to know what was there and being too afraid to find out. Then, through all of that, I heard my grandmother's voice from the other side of my bedroom door. She was encouraging me, almost like she knew I was fighting through something. She kept saying, "You're okay, keep going. You're doing so well. I'm proud of you." After what felt like forever, the presence disappeared. I could move again. I opened my eyes, sat straight up, and realized I was drenched in fear, heart racing, struggling to catch my breath. I ran out of my room and found my grandparents sitting at the dining table, both of them still awake, which was unusual that late at night. It was probably around 11. I looked at my grandmother and asked, "Were you just standing outside my door?" She looked confused and said, "No." So I told them everything. The dream, the presence, her voice, all of it. When I finished, neither of them really had much to say. My grandmother just pulled me into a long hug and told me to try to get some rest. That was almost 10 years ago, and honestly, it still stays with me. Even now, there are moments when I wake up in the dark and feel that old fear creeping back in. That fear of opening my eyes and seeing something terrible staring down at me. I I need to tell you about a house that has stayed with me my whole life. It belonged to my great-grandmother, and it sat near an old burial ground. Everyone in my family had stories about that place. My mom, my uncles, my aunts, they all talked about things that never quite made sense. Lights would blink for no reason. Shadows would slip past doorways. Marks would show up on the bed sheets like someone had pressed a hand there. Little objects would turn up in different spots. Nothing dramatic enough to prove anything, but always just unsettling enough to leave you uneasy. I was about 13 when something finally happened to me. Back then, my cousin Lila and I were inseparable. She was only a few years older than me, so summers at that house felt like our own little world. We spent whole days outside, riding bikes, swimming until our hair smelled like chlorine, making up games, setting out silly afternoon tea spreads, staying busy from morning to night. We barely ever bothered with television. But one night, after our grandparents had gone to bed, we decided to do something different and turn the TV on. The living room was small and comfortable. There was a couch against the wall, a fireplace across from it, and a mirror hanging above the mantel. The TV sat off to the side. From where you stood, you could see straight into the kitchen and part of the dining room through the open layout. At one point, I got up to grab a few snacks. As I walked through the narrow space between the hallway and the dining room, I glanced at the mirror over the fireplace. And in the reflection, I saw her. There was a girl standing in the kitchen doorway. She had long, dark hair hanging over her face, and she was wearing a white gown that looked old-fashioned, almost like a nightdress. She wasn't moving at all. She just stood there, completely still. I cannot explain the feeling that hit me when I saw her. It was like all the warmth left my body at once. I just stared, locked in place, too scared to even breathe properly. Then I finally snapped out of it, ran back to the couch, and told Lila exactly what I'd seen. What scared me even more was that she didn't laugh it off. She looked shaken, but not shocked. She told me she'd had strange experiences in that house too. She'd seen odd impressions on the bed at night, strange marks that looked like handprints, things she could never explain. So that night, neither of us slept very well. The next morning we woke up and realized the house was empty. That had never happened before. Our grandparents had never left us there alone. We found a note on the kitchen counter saying they had gone into town for a quick errand and would be back soon. So we did what kids do when they're trying to distract themselves. We turned the TV on again. The problem was, neither of us really knew how to use the remote properly. After pressing a bunch of buttons and arguing over which one did what, I finally got a cartoon channel to come on, and we sat down to watch. Only a few minutes later, the screen suddenly cut to static. At first, I thought I'd pressed something by accident. I started messing with the remote, trying button after button, but nothing fixed it. The stranger part was that the only button that seemed to respond was volume up. Every time I pressed it, the static got louder, sharper, more aggressive. I tried to turn the TV off, but it wouldn't respond. And then, through all that static, we heard a voice. It was low and rough, definitely a woman's voice, and it said, very slowly, "I know who you are." I just froze. I looked at Lila and asked, "Did you hear that?" She nodded, and I could see all the color had drained from her face. I remember whispering, almost crying, "It's the girl from last night." At that point, I completely lost it. I covered my ears and started rocking back and forth, and Lila, just as frightened as I was, rushed over and yanked the plug out of the wall. The sound stopped immediately. We sat there in silence for a long time. Neither of us knew what to say. We were just staring at each other, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. After a while, I convinced myself there had to be an explanation. So we plugged the TV back in. And just like that, it came on normally. The cartoon was back. The static was gone. The remote worked perfectly, including the volume down button that suddenly had no problem at all. I even checked the channel guide, trying to find some clue, some strange program, some horror preview, anything that might explain that voice. But there was nothing. The timing didn't line up with any show or commercial. Nothing fit. That's the part that has stayed with me all these years. I still don't know who that voice belonged to. I don't know why it said it knew me. I don't know whether it was trying to warn me, scare me, or pull me towards something I'm glad I never understood. But I can tell you this with complete honesty. After that summer, I stopped calling myself a skeptic. So I've always believed in ghosts and the paranormal, and my friend Ryan does too. It's kind of become our thing. We talk about this stuff all the time, and every now and then we try to help people when something strange starts happening around them. This all really began when another friend of mine, I'll call him Jeremy, told me he'd been seeing this tall, pale, faceless man following him around. At first, I honestly thought he was joking, because it sounded a little too close to some creepy internet story. But then he mentioned the long, thin fingers, and that caught me off guard, because I'd actually heard descriptions like that before from other people. So I started asking Jeremy questions, trying to figure out exactly what he was seeing, and I could not pin it down. Whatever it was, it seemed to be following him all the way home. I texted Ryan, who lives about an hour away from me, and that detail mattered because he was nowhere near us. But he started helping right away. He was researching while I was telling Jeremy not to look directly at it and to act like it wasn't there. Then Ryan texted me and said, "My lamp just got knocked over when I tried to look this thing up." That was enough for one night. We both stopped and went to bed. The next day I checked in with Jeremy, and he said he hadn't seen or heard anything since. Later on, I was lying in bed, and out of nowhere this image flashed into my mind so clearly it made my stomach drop. I saw a faceless man crouched outside my room, peeking under my door, with those long, spidery fingers reaching underneath. What's strange is, that figure turned out not to be the main problem. Later, we came to believe he was actually trying to warn us, but at the time, I had no way of knowing that. That was just the beginning. Nothing much happened for a while after that. A couple of months passed. Then Ryan came over because we were going to a convention together that weekend. And at some point that night, we decided to do tarot readings for each other, mostly out of curiosity. The readings were actually surprisingly helpful. After that, I turned on a spirit box. I'm usually skeptical about spirit boxes, or at least I try to be. But that night, I couldn't explain away what was happening. It said my name multiple times. It said Ryan's name too, and then I felt this overwhelming presence behind me. So strong it made me freeze. In my mind, I saw that same tall white figure again. At the time, I thought it was threatening us. Later, I started to believe it had been trying to warn us. Back then, though, we thought something else was at the center of it. We started referring to it as the snake. A few weeks later, Ryan and I were on video call. While we were talking, I suddenly felt drawn to my bedroom door. I set my camera near it so Ryan could see the crack under the door, but not the things I was placing on the floor. Ryan started describing in eerie detail exactly what I was seeing in my head. That was when I decided to try communicating. I wrote yes and no on a piece of paper and placed it near the door. I said that if something was there, it could tap one side for yes and the other for no. We did that for a while. Then Ryan said it seemed to be pointing toward my tarot deck. So I pulled out 3 cards that represented me, Ryan, and another friend, who I'll call Jonah. I laid them in front of the door. Ryan couldn't see the cards themselves, only the space near the door. And somehow, every single time, it indicated Ryan's card. I shuffled the order and repeated it several times, and it still chose the same one. That unsettled me. Then I asked if Jonah was important somehow, and the answer came back yes, even though Jonah barely knew anything about what had been happening. Later, I remembered how often the Page of Cups had been showing up in readings. I placed that card down and asked if it represented whatever was there. The answer was yes. So I repeated the same test, mixing that card in face down with the others, and again, it picked the correct one. At that point, we thought maybe this presence was strange, but safe. A few nights after that, Ryan and I were trying again to get answers. At one point, Ryan said, "It's like his hand is being forced not to answer." That stuck with me. So instead of asking out loud, I started asking certain questions silently in my mind, directing them toward whatever was outside the door. When I did that, I got clearer responses. Once, I asked out loud whether it wanted me to open the door, and the answer was yes. But when I asked the same question silently in my head, I got no. So I didn't open it. That was the moment I started feeling that there was more than one presence out there. One of them felt controlled, almost restrained. The other felt heavier, darker, and wrong in a way that's hard to explain unless you felt it. Then came the worst mistake I made. I lowered part of the spiritual protection I keep around myself, just enough that communication would be easier. The second I did that, Ryan saw a black hand creeping under my door. That changed everything. Up until then, there were details I hadn't fully said out loud, maybe because I didn't want them to become more real. But by then, I couldn't ignore the pattern anymore. We had reason to believe that this darker presence was the same thing Ryan believed had tried to attack him when he was a child. And for me, it connected to something I'd seen years ago with my cousin when I was maybe 7. A tall black figure with red eyes. So when Ryan described black fingers reaching under my door, it hit something deep in me. We tried asking it questions, but it didn't really want to answer. It just kept trying to touch me. It couldn't because I put my protection back up, but it kept trying. At one point, I held my hands near the door and asked both the snake and the darker thing to touch me. The difference was immediate. The snake's touch felt steady, almost gentle, like a hand laid flat against mine. The other one hovered. It felt invasive, calculating. Later, through tarot and the little bits of communication we could get, it basically exposed itself as manipulative and controlling, which honestly confirmed what we already suspected. By then, we believed it had been controlling the snake for a long time. And that's where things stand right now. I've been sick these past few days, so I haven't pushed further. Ryan even tried posting about this once before, but when the post went up, the whole body text was gone. He showed me a screenshot proving he'd written it all out, but when I opened the link, there was nothing there except the title. He said he felt this deep sense of dread while writing it. That's the same feeling I get when I talk about this too long. So that's my story. I know how unbelievable it sounds. I know some of it sounds impossible when you say it out loud. But this is exactly how it happened. And I'm sharing it because I want someone to understand that I'm not telling it for attention. I'm telling it because something is wrong, and I want to figure out what this thing is, how to get rid of it, and how to free that other presence from whatever hold it's under. So this all started when I found 2 framed paintings at a neighborhood sale, and I was instantly pulled toward them. The frames were stunning, the artwork was beautiful, and even though I could tell they were more modern than antique, I didn't care. They looked exactly like something my mom, Marissa, would love, and they would have fit her style so perfectly that I felt like I had to bring them home. The best part was that I got both of them for $15, which felt like such a win. The woman selling them was really kind, and while we were talking, she told me she had originally bought them for her own mother. Not long after she hung them up in her mom's house, her mother passed away. At the time, I just felt sorry for her and told her how sorry I was for her loss. I didn't think much more about it after that. When I got home, I measured the paintings and realized they were way too large for my place, so I left them in the trunk of my SUV, figuring I'd deal with them later. But even then, I noticed something strange. I got attached to them almost immediately. I didn't want to donate them, didn't want to sell them, didn't even really want to talk about giving them away. It felt oddly personal, even though they were just 2 pictures I'd picked up on a random afternoon. I bought them around September of 2024, and by early April 2025, they were still sitting in my car. And ever since they've been there, things have happened that I still can't really explain. The first time was sometime in October. I was driving to work, talking on the phone with my partner, and he suggested we could just drop the paintings off at a thrift store so someone else could enjoy them. I didn't get furious or anything, but I felt this sudden irritation rise up in me, way stronger than it should have been. I told him the paintings were staying with me until I found the right place for them. The second he kept pushing the idea, the call cut out. Every electronic system in my car shut down, and this awful buzzing sound blasted through the speakers. It scared me so badly I nearly swerved off the road. I had to pull over, shut the whole car off, and restart it to make it stop. What made it even stranger was that the vehicle was practically brand new. I'd only had it a short time. Then later that month, after work one night, I got into my car and was getting ready to back out when I glanced in the rearview mirror. I swear I saw the top of someone's head behind the back seats. It was just enough to make out curly, dark gray hair and part of a forehead before it ducked down. I jumped out immediately and checked everywhere. The trunk, the back rows, all of it. No one was there. I even looked around the parking lot to see if someone had walked past the car, but the only people nearby didn't look anything like what I'd seen. And where I work, on that shift especially, it would have been unusual to see an older woman around at all. The third thing happened in November during a break at work. I was in my car trying to nap, or at least rest with my eyes closed. While I was lying there, I heard movement in the back and this soft tapping sound, like fingernails or glass being lightly touched. At first I thought maybe someone was tapping on the window to get my attention, but when I looked, no one was there. I tried to ignore it and settle back down, but the sounds kept going. Then I felt something tug my hair. I got out of there so fast and went right back inside to work. That alone should tell you how shaken I was, because I never cut my break short unless something is really wrong. And honestly, those are only a few of the things that have happened. There have been more, but even saying these out loud makes me feel ridiculous and unsettled at the same time. Now I'm stuck in this place where I don't know what to do. Every time the subject of getting rid of the paintings comes up, something weird seems to happen. So lately, I've just been telling people they're staying with me, that they can stay in my car as long as they need to. But that's not really possible anymore. I'm pregnant, and before long, I'm going to need that trunk space for a stroller and baby stuff. And the thought of something going wrong while I'm driving, especially while pregnant or later with my son in the car, scares me more than I can explain. I think what I really need is for someone to tell me I'm overthinking this. That maybe I absorbed that woman's story more deeply than I realized, and now my mind is connecting every strange thing to those paintings. That maybe there isn't anything attached to them at all, and I can let them go without something terrible happening. Because I want to believe that. I really do. I just haven't been able to shake this feeling long enough to do anything about it. My name's Mara, and I still get chills when I think about this house. We moved in about 6 years ago, and not long after that, little things started happening that I just could not explain. One of the first times was down in the basement. I'd gone down there in the afternoon to grab a small tackle box because I needed a few fishing hooks. Our basement is only partly underground, so during the day it gets enough natural light that I usually do not bother turning the overhead light on. I found what I needed, set the hooks on a table, and as I was putting the box back, I accidentally clipped the edge of the little container. It hit the floor and hooks scattered everywhere. I bent down to pick them up, and right then, the basement light switched on. At first, I honestly was not scared. My husband was due home around that time, so I figured he must have come in, seen me on the floor gathering hooks, and flipped the switch to help me out. I even said, "Thanks," but there was no answer. I called for him again. Still nothing. So I went upstairs to check. He was not home. The dog was the only other living thing in that house with me. What unsettled me most was that the light had not flicked on by itself before that day, and it has not done it since. The switch was physically flipped up. Something had moved it. The doors were locked. The house was quiet, and I still do not know what turned that light on for me. After that, more things started happening. Another time I was cleaning upstairs with one of those canister vacuums, the kind with a main power button and a separate switch on the head for the rollers. I had just finished the stairs and shut it off, but left it plugged in because I was about to do the living room next. I walked down the hall to change the laundry, and suddenly, the vacuum roared to life behind me. Even my dog reacted. We both turned at the same time and stared down the hall. There was nobody near it. Nothing touched it, but it was running. Then there was the day I thought I saw my husband in the basement. We had just come home with groceries. He was carrying things in, and I went downstairs to scoop food for the dog from the storage bin under the stairs. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw what looked exactly like him coming down the steps. He paused just behind me for a second, then moved toward the back part of the basement where we keep extra drinks and canned stuff. So I asked, "Do you have more to bring down?" No answer. I asked again. Still nothing. I stepped around the corner, expecting to see him there, but the space was empty. Completely empty. I went back upstairs with the dog food and found my husband at the far end of the house. He told me he had not even been downstairs yet. That one really got to me. And the reason it got to me even more is because my husband used to brush all of this off. He did not believe in ghosts, spirits, any of it. Every time I told him something strange had happened, he would look at me like I was imagining things. Then, one evening, he had his own experience. I was driving home from work, talking to him on the phone. He was in the middle of a sentence when he suddenly stopped, just dead silent. My heart dropped because I thought something had happened. Then he said, very quietly, "Hang on, someone's here." That already felt wrong, because the dog had not barked. A moment later he came back and said, "I need to call you right back. I just saw somebody outside the door and I do not know where they went." We live way out in the country. The nearest neighbors are far enough away that you would notice a car, a person, anything. He went outside, checked around the house, looked near the garage and the sheds, and found nobody. Nothing. He told me he was sure he had seen someone in a flannel shirt walk past the door, but whoever it was had simply vanished. And still, the dog never reacted. Even now, every once in a while, I catch the smell of cigarette smoke in one corner of the basement. Just that one spot. Nowhere else in the house. We do not smoke, so it stands out immediately. There is never any visible smoke, just that smell drifting in for no reason. There have been other odd moments too. Strange little things I have tried to explain away because I wanted there to be a normal reason. For a while, I even wondered if I was just overtired or letting my imagination get the better of me. But once my husband saw something too, I stopped feeling like I had to defend myself. The house itself is not especially old. It was built in the 1970s, and as far as we know, no one died here. But there was an older farmhouse on the property before this one was built, and that place was torn down years ago. I have sometimes wondered whether whatever is here did not leave when that house did. One more thing that matters. I am deaf in one ear. So yes, there are times when my husband can come into the house and I genuinely will not hear him, depending on where I am and which side he is on. That is part of why we got the dog in the first place. He always alerts us when someone comes down the driveway, and when I am home alone, I keep every door locked. So when things happen in that house, I do not jump to conclusions lightly. But after everything I have seen, everything I have heard, and everything my husband has seen too, I cannot shake the feeling that we are sharing that house with something we cannot explain. I was 19 when this started. It was my first year in college, and I stayed behind in the dorms over fall break because home was not a place I felt safe going back to. Almost everyone else had cleared out, so the building felt hollow, like it was holding its breath. The first strange thing happened that very first weekend. I stepped out to do laundry late at night, and as I passed the window at the end of the hall, I caught the reflection of a girl with dark hair standing behind me. Just for a second. When I turned, no one was there. It vanished so fast I almost convinced myself I imagined it, but it left this cold feeling in me that I couldn't shake. After that, nights got harder. I'd wake up in the dark and hear this deep, heavy breathing under my bed. Not like a person, more like some large animal. Slow, deliberate, too close. I was trying to live like a normal college kid, you know? Going out, meeting people, pretending everything was fine. But whatever was happening kept pushing its way into my life. It felt like something dark had attached itself to me. I didn't grow up thinking this kind of thing was real, so part of me kept trying to explain it away. But another part of me knew I was experiencing something I couldn't explain. I felt split in half. One version of me wanted to fit in and keep moving. The other one knew something was terribly wrong. As the weeks passed, it escalated. My bed would shake hard enough to wake me. Once, I was sitting in the bathroom and the toilet started vibrating underneath me. Another time I was studying alone, and the book in my hand snapped shut on its own. By then, I wasn't even shocked anymore. I was irritated. It had become constant enough to interfere with everyday life. One afternoon, I was alone in my room, lying on my bed, when I felt the sheets lift and tug away from me. A friend of mine, a deeply religious guy, had already given me advice because I'd finally told him some of what had been happening. He told me to turn on the lights, speak directly to whatever it was, and tell it plainly that it had no authority over me. So I climbed off the bed, stood up on my desk chair because for some reason I felt safer off the floor, and I said out loud, "In the name of Christ, leave me alone." The second I said it, my desk lamp started flickering wildly until it went dead. Just dead. I tried to switch it back on, and nothing happened. I ran out of that room so fast. A few nights later, I had one of the most vivid dreams of my life. In the dream, I was lying in bed when the mattress opened beneath me, like a black pit had formed in the center of it, and I started falling. There was something inside that darkness laughing at me, mocking me. And then, somehow, I spoke back to it in words I didn't consciously know. I still can't explain that. I don't remember exactly what I said, only that it meant something like, "You cannot have her." Then I rose above that opening, and my chest filled with this overwhelming love, so strong it felt almost unbearable. I woke up before it peaked, but I never forgot that feeling. Eventually, I told another friend everything. He took me to a Catholic church to speak with a priest. While we were there, sitting in that quiet office, both of us felt this awful heaviness in the room, like something was standing just outside our sight, listening. The priest gave advice, though honestly, I barely remember it now, and it didn't seem to change much. Later, back at the dorm, my friend and I were talking when I suddenly felt that same dark force move into me. I know how unbelievable that sounds, but I felt it, unmistakably. I didn't say anything out loud. In my mind, I told it to leave. I said it with everything I had. And the moment it lifted from me, I watched my friend's face drain completely white. He looked terrified and said, "I think something's trying to get into me." After that, the activity around me weakened. It didn't disappear right away, but it lost some of its grip. At the same time, my friend started saying he was having experiences of his own. My dreams changed too. I kept seeing him in them, but not as himself. The dreams would begin normally, and then something would shift. The people around me would peel off their faces, almost like masks, and reveal something monstrous underneath. They would laugh and chant, "You're only human," over and over, like it was an accusation. Not long after that, the friendship fell apart. He started acting in ways that deeply unsettled me, and we drifted out of each other's lives. Months later, while visiting another friend in a different town, I met with another priest. This time they prepared for me ahead of time and gave me specially blessed holy water, along with instructions for how to use it, and a prayer to say while blessing my room. I followed those instructions carefully. I went back, prayed through the room, and for the first time since all of this began, I felt like the air changed. After that, I was left alone. Almost completely. There was only one last incident. About a year later, I was in a new dorm room and hadn't thought about any of it in a long time. Then one night, I woke up suddenly to music playing from my phone. It was a Johnny Cash song, "I Walk the Line." The strange part was, I didn't even have that song on my phone. It only played a few lines, and then it stopped. Right after that, there was a knock at the door. Now, in a dorm, a knock at the door shouldn't mean much, but this one was different. It was too loud, too heavy, and somehow too high up on the door, like it came from a place that didn't make physical sense. I froze. I didn't answer it, and that was it. I've never had another experience like those years. More than a decade has passed. I'm in my 30s now, and I still remember the feeling that whatever was with me believed it would come back someday. But here's the truth. I'm not living in fear of it. I've had enough distance now to see that whatever was happening, it did not get to keep me. And if anything ever does try to come back, I know myself better now. I know my own strength better now. That changes everything. I'm not even totally sure how to explain this, but it all really started when I moved into this house in the South a few years ago. Right before the move, I had a serious health scare and spent some time recovering, so I was already feeling worn down and a little off. But after I got settled in, things started happening that I just couldn't shake. At first, it was the dreams. They were strange, vivid, and heavy in a way that's hard to describe. I'd wake up in the middle of the night feeling like someone was in the room with me, like I was being watched. Nothing obvious at first, just that feeling. You know when your body wakes up before your mind catches up and everything feels wrong? It was like that almost every night. Then I started noticing my bedroom door. I'd fall asleep with it barely cracked open, and then I'd wake up and it would be standing wide open. I had a young dog at the time, still just a puppy, so I kept telling myself it had to be him nudging it or moving around. I wanted a normal explanation. But then I started seeing something near the doorway. At first it was just a shadow, the kind of thing you catch out of the corner of your eye and immediately try to explain away. But it kept happening. Night after night, I'd wake up and see this dark figure shift or move just as I looked toward the door. My dog never barked, never reacted the way I thought he should, so I kept convincing myself maybe I was stuck between dreaming and waking. But it got worse. Eventually I had one of those moments where I couldn't move at all. Full sleep paralysis. And what I saw that night is still burned into my mind. There was this figure standing over me and my dog. It looked like a tall woman, just completely dark, with long, tangled hair hanging around her face and shoulders. Everything about her was black, like she wasn't even made of light or shadow, just absence. She didn't say anything. She just stood there looking at me. The next day, the whole house felt off. My brothers and sisters were uneasy too, even though none of us really wanted to say it out loud. We were all in the kitchen trying to act normal, eating and talking, when we thought we heard someone moving around in the garage. We checked, and there was nobody there, so we brushed it off and went back inside. A few minutes later, the garage door slammed from the inside. Every one of us froze. The whole mood changed instantly. Nobody wanted to keep eating after that. There were other things too. The kind of things that sound small until you're standing there watching them happen. One time the kitchen sink turned on by itself. I know how that sounds, I really do. But my sister was there with me. We both watched the handle move on its own and the hot water start running. Neither of us knew what to say. We just stood there staring. And the strangest part was that after a while, it stopped feeling like whatever this was belonged only to the house. It felt attached to me somehow. I started feeling watched even when I wasn't home. I remember once at school, I was walking down the hallway with a friend, and the lights above us started going out one by one as I passed underneath them. Not all at once, just fading in sequence like something was following me. My friend laughed nervously and made some joke about hoping there wasn't something evil around us. The second he said it, the lights came back on. Every single one. We both stopped laughing after that. At work, things would disappear when I was alone. A pen, a marker, sticky notes, little things I had just set down. I'd turn around and they'd be gone. Then the next day, I'd find them sitting exactly where they had been before they disappeared, like nothing had happened. It got to the point where I started doubting my own mind. By then, I hated being by myself. This all started back in 2019, when I had just moved in with my parents. They'd complain about the house sometimes, little noises, doors, random stuff, but they never seemed to see the things I saw. Over time, I tried to ignore it. I got used to pushing certain things out of my mind just to get through the day. But the heavier the energy in that house felt, the stronger all of it seemed to get. It honestly felt like I was being worn down on purpose. One of the more recent things happened when I was bringing home food for my mom. Everything had been fine. I got back to the house, went to open the door, and I swear it should have opened. My mom usually keeps it locked because of her job, and the lock makes a clear sound when it opens properly. I heard the click. I turned the knob. Nothing. I did it again. Another click. Still nothing. Again. Same thing. The lock sounded open, but the door would not move. By that point, I was pounding on the door so hard I felt desperate, like pure panic had taken over. And that's what this has done to me. It's drained me. It's affected my social life, my sleep, my energy, everything. Some mornings I don't even want to get out of bed. I finished school thinking life would finally start moving forward, thinking maybe I had some control again. But instead, it feels like it's just me, my dog, and this house. And my dog? He's not timid at all. He's a strong boxer, trained around tough animals, not the kind of dog that scares easily. Sometimes he'll suddenly get up and stare into empty space like something is standing right there. His whole body goes rigid. He'll growl low, circle, and fix on one spot like he wants to attack. But he hesitates, like he knows something isn't right. It got so intense that I started keeping him outside more often, because once he got older, he would not settle down when he sensed it. I'm telling you, living like that changes you. Even when nothing is happening, you're waiting for it to happen. You're bracing for the next sound, the next shadow, the next moment where something small turns into something you can't explain. And after a while, you start wondering whether it's the house, or whether whatever it is has decided to follow you. I need to tell you about something that happened when I was in high school. I'm pushing 40 now, so this goes way back, but I still remember it so clearly. At the time, I was living with my family in a condo. It was me, my mom, my dad, and my younger brother. My dad usually worked late managing a restaurant, so he was often out in the evenings. My mom worked daytime hours, so she'd usually be home at night, moving around the kitchen or tidying something up. My brother was almost always planted in front of the TV. This was in the late 90s, maybe right around the early 2000s, so we had this old computer set up in my parents' room. I loved being on it. I was probably doing the most era-appropriate thing possible, downloading songs, chatting online, wasting time. Beside the desk was this little entry space leading past the closets, and from where I sat, I could see part of it out of the corner of my eye. One night, while I was focused on the screen, I clearly saw what looked like a pair of legs walking away from me toward the bedroom door. I barely reacted at first because I assumed it was my brother. But then I turned to look, and there was no one there. The door was only partly open, and there's no way he could have slipped through that fast without me noticing. Right after that, this cold, uneasy feeling hit me in the stomach. I froze. I remember just sitting there, staring, trying to make sense of it. Eventually, I went back to what I was doing, but I kept the whole thing to myself. About a week later, I was in the living room talking to my mom. We were standing across from each other, and behind her was a wall with 3 large mirrors. While she was speaking, I saw this blurred shadow move quickly across one of the mirrors. It happened so fast, but I know I saw it. I stopped her right in the middle of her sentence and said, "Mom, please don't panic, but I just saw something in the mirror." That did not go over well. She immediately got upset and thought I was joking. I told her I was being completely serious, but that only made her more unsettled. And the thing is, nothing had been influencing me. I hadn't watched anything creepy, hadn't read anything spooky, hadn't even told anyone yet about what I'd seen in the bedroom. Then maybe another week passed, and one day my dad came home with news. He'd become friendly with the building manager, a guy named Randy, and as soon as he walked in, he said, "You won't believe this. Randy told me they found one of the tenants dead." Apparently, someone who lived alone on another floor had passed away quietly in their unit, and no one realized for at least a couple of weeks. The second I heard that, everything in me dropped. My dad had no idea about the things I'd seen, but I knew, deep down, that whatever I had witnessed was connected. I never felt like it was something evil. More than anything, it felt sad. Like someone was disoriented, lingering, trying to be noticed. I never found out who that person was, but I still think about them sometimes, and I honestly hope they found peace. So, let me tell you what happened. At the time, my ex and I were living in this small one-bedroom apartment, the same one I'm still in now. The building was owned by an older man named Danny, and it had a few little one-bedroom units in it. He got sick with lung cancer, and not long after that, he was gone. It all happened so fast. The place had been in his family for years, passed down from his grandmother, and I'm honestly not sure who owned it before that. A little while after Danny passed, my ex and one of the neighbors, Sherry, who was actually his niece, decided to make a Ouija board and try to contact him. They were hoping for answers, I guess, but neither of them really knew how to use one safely. When I found out, I wasn't thrilled. I'd had bad experiences with Ouija boards before, and I never liked the whole idea of inviting something in and giving it permission to move through you. That never sat right with me. I was always interested in the paranormal, sure, but I preferred other methods. Spirit boxes, things like that. Safer, at least in my mind. Anyway, a couple of days passed and I kind of forgot about the whole thing. Then one night, I got home from work late. I was on an evening shift back then, so it was well after midnight. My ex was still out, and the apartment was completely dark when I walked in. The first thing I noticed was this strange shimmer across the living room floor, like tiny sparks catching the light from outside. I flipped on the lamp, and my stomach just dropped. There was glass everywhere. I had this thick tempered glass panel sitting on top of my wooden coffee table, left over from an older table I used to have. And it hadn't just cracked, it had exploded. I mean, there were pieces from one side of the room to the other. I even started recording because my first thought was that somebody had broken in. I checked the whole apartment, of course, but it's a small place. Nobody was there. What really got me was that the center of it all seemed to come from this covered candle that had been used during that Ouija session. That table had taken plenty of wear over time. I'd dropped things on it before. Nothing had ever happened. But this was different. Big chunks had blown outward in every direction. It didn't look like a normal break. It looked violent. When my ex got home, she was just as shaken as I was, and honestly, that was only the beginning. For the next few weeks, things in the apartment got intense. The kind of intense where you start running out of logical explanations and you don't know what to do next. I tried cleansing the place, and, weirdly enough, that seemed to make things worse instead of better. The moment that really pushed me over the edge happened about a week later. We had just come back from grocery shopping. I remember very clearly setting a big bag of cat litter on the kitchen table. I know I did. My ex, Becca, had to run back out to the store because we forgot something, and I stepped outside for a cigarette. My cat was out there with me, sitting near the window. Then, I heard it. That bag had a very specific plastic sound, and I heard it shift, like somebody had picked it up. Then I heard it set down, and a second later, I heard the soft thud of it tipping onto the floor. My cat snapped to attention immediately, ears straight up, staring hard toward the inside of the apartment. I went to the front door, which had a little window in it, and looked through before I stepped inside. That bag of litter was sitting right in the middle of the kitchen floor. Not near the table, not half off the edge. In the middle of the floor. And I just stood there staring at it. To make sure I wasn't losing my mind, I called Becca and asked, "Where did I put the litter?" And without hesitation she said, "On the table." Exactly. I started laughing, not because it was funny, but because I was in total disbelief. Just that wild, nervous kind of laugh when your brain can't catch up with what's happening. Then I opened the door and tried to walk back inside. The second I stepped in, I felt something move through me. That's the only way I know how to say it. Something passed right through me. My whole body started shaking uncontrollably. Not for a minute or two either. It went on for hours. Then I started crying, and the strangest part was that the emotion didn't even feel like mine. I remember thinking, why am I crying? I wasn't sad. I was confused, completely baffled. When Becca got home, she asked what was wrong, and all I could say was, I honestly don't know. To this day, it's one of the most bizarre things I've ever experienced. Eventually, someone gave me a few traditional items to try for protection, and little by little, the activity seemed to calm down. Thank God for that, because whatever had been building in here felt heavy, oppressive, like the air itself had weight to it. That's the part I still can't shake. You know how you can walk into a room after people have been arguing, and you can feel the tension before anyone says a word? It was like that, except darker, stronger, like every instinct in your body was trying to warn you that something was off. Personally, I don't believe my ex and Sherry made contact with Danny at all. I think whatever answered them was something else entirely, and I don't think it was harmless. It felt aggressive. It felt mean. And as time went on, it felt like it was getting bolder. That whole experience changed the way I look at this stuff. It sent me down a rabbit hole, honestly. I still find the paranormal fascinating, but after living through that, I also take it a whole lot more seriously than I used to. So I want to tell you about something that's been weighing on me, because I'm genuinely worried about my dad and his family. Up until recently, neither of us really believed in anything paranormal. Not me, not him. It just wasn't something we took seriously. We had never gone through anything that made us think the supernatural was real, so it always felt like the kind of thing that only happened in movies or stories other people told. My dad, Daniel, lives in another state for work, and not long ago he moved out of one house and into another one just a little way down the road. The new place came with a lot more land, which is why the company wanted him there. For the past couple of weeks, he's been slowly settling in, fixing things up, moving boxes, trying to make it feel like home. But he told me that from the very first night, something about that house felt wrong. He says most of the activity happens at night. Sometimes when he's lying in bed, he feels the mattress pressed down near his feet, like someone has sat on the edge of it. But the second he jolts upright, the pressure disappears. Not long after moving in, he also started hearing scratching and pounding inside the walls, and at times, even the windows seemed to rattle hard enough to make him jump. He's not the only one who's noticed it. A couple of people staying in the house have mentioned seeing dark shapes move through the rooms. There have been alarms going off for no reason, cabinets opening and shutting on their own, and loud banging that seems to come from nowhere. My dad tries to stay calm, but I can tell it's getting to him. His wife and her 2 children stay over sometimes, and there were 2 moments in particular that really shook all of them. The first happened one night when everyone was sleeping in the same room. My dad and his wife were in the bed, and the kids, a boy around 10 and a girl around 8, were sleeping on an air mattress nearby. My dad said the banging in the walls started again, louder than usual, and finally, he'd had enough. Wanting to protect his family, he shouted into the room, telling whatever was there to leave, that it was not welcome, and he commanded it to go in the name of Jesus Christ. Right after that, things got quiet. The kids went into the living room and sat on the couch, while my dad and his wife stayed behind in the bedroom for a minute or 2, just trying to process what had happened. But when they walked into the living room to check on the children, they found both of them huddled under blankets, completely covered up and terrified. My dad asked what was wrong, and his stepdaughter said she had heard pounding on the front door, like someone was trying to force it open. She also said there was banging at the window, and then she saw a strange light outside, almost like a flashlight shining through. That part really stuck with my dad, because he remembered his grandfather once telling him that spirits can appear with a glow, like a beam of light. We're Hispanic, so maybe that belief comes from stories passed down in the family, but either way, it scared him. The second moment happened when his stepdaughter was taking a shower. When she came out, she asked her mom, "What did you want? Were you calling me?" But her mom looked confused and said she hadn't called her at all. Then she asked her son if he had been knocking on the bathroom door, and he said no, because he knew his sister was in the shower and didn't want to bother her. That's when the little girl explained that while she was bathing, she clearly heard knocking and the sound of someone trying to open the bathroom door. She truly thought someone outside wanted her attention. Around that same time, she also said she saw a woman wearing a long white dress in the house. That image alone gave me chills. My dad ended up going to a local church to speak with a pastor. After hearing everything, the pastor told him it sounded less like random disturbances and more like something dark, possibly demonic. Right now, I think they're trying to arrange for the pastor to come bless or cleanse the home. In the meantime, my dad has been trying to get holy water, and the pastor gave him a Bible verse to read over the house as part of the process. What gets me is that my dad is trying so hard to stay strong. He works these brutal shifts, usually 12 hours or more, and he says staying busy helps keep his mind off it. But eventually, the workday ends, and he still has to drive back to that house. And when he says that part quietly, like he dreads going home, it really gets to me. I can tell he's scared, even if he doesn't say it outright. And I'm scared too, because I keep thinking about what could happen if whatever is there becomes more aggressive. I don't want him, his wife, or those kids to get hurt. That's why I'm sharing this with you. I care about him so much, and I just want to help in any way I can. You know, I've always been a pretty skeptical person. I'm the kind of person who usually looks for the logical explanation first. But there's been something in this house for as long as I can remember, and even now, I still do not fully know what to make of it. One of my earliest memories of it goes back to when I was maybe 7 years old. Back then, my brother and I had bunk beds, and I slept on the bottom. The foot of the bed faced the doorway, so if anything was there, you noticed it right away. I woke up one night and saw this dark figure leaning in through the doorway, just watching me. What stuck with me most was its head. It looked jagged somehow, almost like it had sharp, uneven points or wild hair standing out around it. I remember being scared, but not in a panicked way, more like I just knew I did not want to move. So I turned over and stayed there until I fell back asleep. As I got older, little things kept happening around the house. I would hear my name spoken softly. Lights would switch off when I was alone. A few times, the pull blinds in different rooms snapped upward all at once when I walked in. None of it happened often enough to make daily life impossible, but it happened enough that I stopped being shocked by it. I sort of learned to live with it. Then, about a decade ago, when I was around 21, my cousin and I were sitting in the kitchen late one night, just talking. He was facing the doorway that led out to the mudroom, and it was dark out there. In the middle of our conversation, he suddenly got this strange look on his face, like he was trying to decide whether he should say something. I asked him what was wrong. At first he hesitated, which honestly made it worse. Then he finally told me he had just seen a large figure lean around the doorway and look into the kitchen. And the detail he could not shake was the head. He said it looked oddly pointed, almost spiked. The second he said that, I got chills. I had never forgotten what I saw as a kid, and hearing him describe nearly the same thing without me prompting him was hard to brush off. A few years ago, my wife and I bought the house from my father and moved in. Not long after that, my wife started having her own experiences. She heard her name spoken to her one day in a woman's voice, not shouted from another room, but said quietly, like someone was right there beside her. One of those same blinds I used to see move on their own suddenly shot upward near her too. She has also told me she has seen movement out of the corner of her eye more than once. One night, we were both in bed and a set of keys slid right off the nightstand and hit the floor, even though neither of us was anywhere near it. Then things seemed to pick up even more. Our niece Mara has been staying with us for about a year. A few weeks back, she was in the laundry area and heard someone say, "Hey," right behind her in a female voice. She turned around thinking someone had walked in, but no one was there. Then, not long after that, she told us she woke up and saw a tall, dark figure in her room. She said the shoulders looked uneven, almost slanted, and the head looked strange, fuller somehow, like it had thick, messy hair. A couple of nights later, her friend stayed over and said she saw a figure lean into the bedroom from the doorway. She described it as having a large head, then said it pulled back and vanished. Later that same day, Mara was half asleep during a nap when she heard a young man's voice right in front of her say, "Hey," clearly enough to wake her. That is the part that gets to me now. When I was younger, I only had a handful of experiences I could not explain. But lately, it feels like whatever is here is showing itself more to the people around me than to me. Almost like it wants to be noticed. And that is what unsettles me most. It does not feel human exactly, but it does not feel openly threatening either. It just feels present, like something that has always been here, quietly hovering at the edge of things. and now for some reason, it is stepping a little closer. I've had this strange thing happen to me, on and off for most of my life. And even now, at 35, I still do not really know what to make of it. The first time it happened, I was 16. I was helping my friend Mara paint her mom's rental house. We were working all day, and at one point I needed something, so I called out her name. When I turned around, I saw what looked exactly like Mara heading into one of the bedrooms, slipping behind those hanging plastic sheets people use while painting. I followed her, talking as I went, and just before I pushed through the plastic, I caught sight of her moving toward the bathroom in the far corner. But when I stepped into the room and looked around, no one was there. I called her name again, louder this time. She answered me from outside the house. That was the first time something like that happened, and it stayed with me. Not long after, there were 2 more incidents close together. One day I walked into the living room and my much older brother was staring at me in this odd, unsettled way. He told me he had just seen me walk past him through the kitchen, across the living room, and into a bedroom. He said he had been talking to me the whole time, but I never answered. The strange part was that I had not gone that way at all. I had just come out from the other side of the house. Then, not long after that, I was having people over. I had run to the store and came back home, but instead of going inside, I stayed out front talking and smoking. A little while later, 2 of my friends came out and asked me if I had gone back into the house since I got home. I told them no. They looked completely serious and said they had both seen me walk right past them, straight through the house, not saying a word, heading toward my room. They followed me, thinking I was ignoring them, but when they got there, the room was empty, because I had never gone inside at all. After that, everything went quiet for years. Nothing happened from about 18 until I was around 30. By then, I had 2 kids, and they were little, around 5 and 8, and they had a neighborhood friend over all the time. One afternoon, I was out in the garage with that friend's mom, exercising and chatting while the kids played inside. My kids were always calling Mom for one reason or another, so at first I did not think much of it when I heard them shouting for me. I remember pausing and wondering whether I should go in, but since no one came to get me, I figured they were just wrapped up in their game. A few minutes later, the door swung open and my older daughter came outside looking amazed. She said, "Mom, how did you do that?" I asked her what she meant, and she told me all 3 of them had seen me walking across the living room. They followed me into a bedroom because they wanted drinks, but when they got there, no one was inside. Then she looked at me, standing there in the garage, and could not understand how I had gotten outside so fast. I told her I had been there the whole time. She looked so confused and said, "But Mom, it had your hair." That one really got to me. Then things went quiet again for a while, until this year. I work nights and my partner works days, so our schedules overlap in strange ways. One morning, around 4 a.m., I got a message asking if I had been talking to him through our security cameras. I said no, of course not. He told me he had fallen asleep on the couch and woke up to my voice telling him, very clearly, "Hey, come to bed." At first he thought maybe he was still half asleep, but then he heard it again, sharper this time. It sounded like me, but it was not me. And then just yesterday, I heard my younger daughter's cough coming from her room. She has a very distinct cough, one I would recognize instantly anywhere. But she was not even home. That is what unsettles me most. None of it has ever felt violent or openly threatening. It is just deeply wrong. Like something familiar is passing through the edges of my life, wearing the right face, the right voice, the right shape, but it is never actually the person I know. I know this sounds far out, but the only theory I have, if I let myself drift into the weirdest explanation, is that maybe these are echoes from another version of reality, almost like different timelines brushing up against each other for a second, and sometimes something slips through. I know how unbelievable that sounds, and maybe there is a perfectly logical explanation for all of it. But after all these years, I still have not found one. I want to tell you something personal. In my family, strange things have a way of showing up, almost like they've been passed down beside eye color and old recipes. My grandma, my sister, my cousins, and me, we've all had moments that still don't sit neatly in my mind. Some of these stories happened to me, and some were told to me by the people I trust most. Either way, they've stayed with me. The first story happened to my little cousin B. She was barely 2 when her parents finally settled into a small mobile home after bouncing from place to place for a while. At first, everything felt calm. It seemed like the kind of place where life might finally steady itself. Then B started chatting with someone no one else could see. Whenever her parents asked who she was talking to, she'd smile and say, "My friend Belle." The thing is, there was no Belle. Nobody in the family, nobody at daycare, nobody they knew. At first, everyone tried to brush it off. She was little after all. But then she started crying and telling her parents Belle was hurting her, even choking her. That was when the mood in the house shifted. B's grandmother, who had always been deeply spiritual, came over to help. She brought in a spirit box and tried to make sense of what might be there. The responses they got were ugly and unsettling, bits of language that didn't feel playful or imaginary at all. Around the same time, B's dad started finding long scratches on his skin with no explanation, and B, who was usually pure sunshine, would suddenly fold into herself and sit in the middle of the floor like she was trying to disappear. Before long, they packed up and left. And once they did, B was herself again. The second story is mine. I was around 4 after my parents divorced, and I spent a lot of nights at my grandma's house where my dad was staying. I wasn't a kid with a huge imagination. I didn't watch scary movies. I didn't go looking for spooky things. But night after night, I had these vivid, awful dreams about a tall man, maybe 6'2" or 6'3", who would stand over me and whisper horrible things. He told me he had killed people I loved. He told me he was going to kill me too. He talked about my pets, my family, everyone I cared about, like he wanted to hollow me out with fear. Eventually, I got so scared of sleeping that I started sleeping in my grandma's room. Even then, I didn't feel safe. Some nights, I would wake up and see a woman in a long navy dress, with dark hair hanging around her face, rushing out of the bathroom, sobbing like her heart had split open. I would scream. My grandma would wake up, and I'd be left shaking so hard I could barely breathe. After I moved away, I never saw either of them again. The third story happened at a family reunion. Every year we gathered at this huge old church school, 3 stories tall, with narrow windows that let you look down into the lower levels. It already had that old building feeling, like every wall had heard too much. One year, my sister, a few cousins, and I snuck upstairs where we absolutely were not supposed to be. We were wandering around, half excited and half nervous, when we heard piano music drifting from one of the rooms. Not random notes either, but a real tune, strange and sad and sharp around the edges. We stepped inside and saw a boy sitting at the piano. That alone made no sense. The building was supposed to be empty. The second he noticed us, he bolted. Of course we ran after him. We chased him down a narrow hallway, and then, just like that, he was gone. No doorway, no stairwell, no place he could have turned. We searched anyway, hearts pounding, but there was nothing. Just silence. The fourth story belongs to my grandma, Cami. When she was young, she had a daughter named Mila. After Mila was born, my grandma started having the same nightmare over and over. In it, she saw a toddler, maybe around 2 years old, lifeless and blue, with water spilling from its mouth. She'd wake up screaming, convinced it was Mila. My grandpa would calm her down, but the dream kept coming back. From then on, she became fiercely protective around water. She never let her guard down, not for a second. Years passed. Mila grew up, became a mother herself, and had 2 daughters, Kinley and Ava. As Mila got older, the nightmares faded, and my grandma started to believe maybe the danger had passed. Then one summer day, Mila took the kids and some family to the lake. She was putting together snacks when she suddenly realized Ava was nowhere in sight. In the next moment, 2 older girls dragged Ava out of the water and onto the shore. Mila went into shock before instinct took over, and she started CPR while Kinley stood nearby, witnessing more than any child should ever have to see. My grandma was called, and Ava was airlifted to the hospital. When my grandma saw her there, she went still. Ava looked exactly like the child from her dream. Ava is me. I'm okay now. I was gone for a few minutes, technically speaking, but I came back. I do carry some damage from it, and I cope with humor more than I probably should. But what stays with me most is what happened after. While I was in the hospital, my grandma told me I talked about seeing mermaids in the water, beautiful women trying to guide me and help me. When I described them, I described relatives who had died before I was born, people I had never met, people I'd never even seen in photos. The last story happened when I was around 10 or 11. I was living with my mom and her ex in this old, pale green house that had to be at least a century old. It was honestly beautiful in the daytime. Big yard, garden, old decorative front door, the kind of place with character in every board and window. But beauty doesn't always mean peace. My room was in the attic, which had been split into 2 spaces, a larger playroom area and my tiny bedroom tucked off to the side. It was cramped, drafty, and full of little problems, but it was mine, and I made it mine. Posters on the wall, shelves, little decorations, all the things that made me feel tucked in and safe. Then one day, my mom's husband got angry with me and took my door off the hinges. After that, my room opened into the dark attic space, and at night, that darkness felt endless. One evening, I was lying in bed on my phone when I heard something from the other room. I looked up, and there were fingers wrapped around the edge of my doorway. Just fingers, curled there like someone was peeking in. I froze. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe right, just sat there crying silently for what felt like forever until I finally screamed. The hand vanished. Not long after that, my youngest sister came running out of her room sobbing, saying something had sprinted across her floor. She was so young that the fear on her face felt real in a way I couldn't explain away. Around that same time, I started hearing a tiny voice near my ear at night, whispering, "Hello," so softly it almost felt polite. It stole my sleep bit by bit. I spiraled into a depression during that time, and I swear the house felt heavier the worse I got, like it fed on sadness. Eventually, my sister and I used a spirit box in that house too. One of the clearest things we heard was a little boy saying, "Sorry, Mommy." Later, after digging into the history of the place, we found stories about a woman who had suffered multiple miscarriages and eventually taken her own life. The attic was the part that always stuck with me. That was where the air felt wrong. So that's my family's strange little collection of stories. Some people will hear all of this and call it coincidence, grief, dreams, old houses making old noises. maybe some of it is. I'm open to that. But when you live through things that sit this close to your skin, it gets harder to dismiss them completely. All I know is this: some moments leave a chill behind long after they're over. And some stories, once they enter a family, never really leave. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Paranormal M channel. I'm so excited to be here and share some of my paranormal experiences from around the world with you. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And thank you so much for sending in all of your paranormal stories. With that said, let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. I've had this story in the back of my mind for years, and even now, I still don't know exactly what to make of it. When I was very small, maybe still a toddler, my family took a trip from Villarrica up to Santiago. Since we're from the south, that felt like a huge journey at the time. My parents were looking through those shops that sell ropa americana, secondhand clothes, old toys, random things that somehow end up here from other places. You can find all kinds of stuff in those piles. That day, they bought a few plush toys for me, mostly characters from cartoons I loved back then. But while they were looking around, my mom noticed an old rag doll and pointed it out to my dad. She said something like, "Look, Javi, what a cute little Pipona." For some reason, they thought it might make a nice gift for one of my childhood friends. I'll call her Amalia. So they bought it. The doll stayed stored away in a back room at our house for a few weeks, maybe even longer, until one day my parents remembered they still had to take it to Amalia's family. Eventually, they did. I remember that doll more clearly than I probably should. Under its dress, sewn into the chest area, there was a little fabric heart. Amalia and I used to play with each other's toys all the time, so I noticed details like that. I even remember once asking if she would just give me all her dolls, since she barely played with them anymore. Then the strange things started. Her family began saying the doll would show up in different places around the house. They heard noises too, little sounds that didn't make sense, especially when no one was nearby. At some point, they checked the label and realized it was apparently from the same line or series people connected to the original Annabelle doll. I don't remember the exact date, but I was told it was something like the 1960s. The weird part is that none of us knew anything about Annabelle at the time. This was years ago, and our parents weren't the kind of people constantly online or reading spooky stories on social media. One memory still stands out so sharply that I can picture it right now. I went with my family to Amalia's house one day, and I remember heading toward the dining room. At the time, when you opened the door, you could see straight to the table. And there it was, that doll, sitting at the head of the table, facing the entrance. I froze. What made it so unsettling was that the chair was much too high for Amalia or me to have placed it there ourselves, and I had been told the doll had been upstairs earlier. I know that now, as an older person, some people would probably try to explain it away. But to me, as a little kid, it was horrifying. I burst into tears and ran right back outside. After that, the adults started taking it more seriously. I was told they looked into what to do with it. They didn't want to burn it, and apparently when they tried getting rid of it, it somehow kept turning up again. In the end, Amalia's older brother, who was a teenager then, took it to his school. The unsettling part is that it happens to be the same school I attend now. My family is Catholic, and we were never the kind of people who went around believing in ghosts or paranormal stories. So that's part of why this has always stayed with me. Nobody wanted to believe it was anything strange. But strange things kept happening anyway. Then years later, sometime around 2023, I had another experience that brought everything back. All the chairs were turned inward, facing the center of the room, almost in a circle. And in the middle, there was this shadow. It didn't look right. I can't explain it better than that. I called one of my friends over, let's call her Camila, so she could see it too. The second she looked, she panicked. She started crying, and we both ran downstairs to the patio as fast as we could. Later, one of the cleaning ladies told us she often saw and heard odd things in that building, especially late at night when she stayed until midnight. So honestly, I still don't know what it was. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was fear making everything feel bigger than it was. Or maybe some objects really do carry something with them. Something heavy. Something that lingers. I still remember that doll sitting at the end of the table, waiting there before I even stepped inside. And out of everything, I think that's the part I've never been able to explain. I've gone back and forth for years about whether to tell this story, but I think I'm finally ready to say it out loud. This happened about 15 years ago, somewhere around 2 in the morning. My mom and I were driving south on Interstate 5 in San Diego, getting close to the SeaWorld Drive exit. We were almost home, and the whole ride had been... At that point in my life, everything was a mess. I had lost my husband suddenly when I was still very young, and the grief completely unraveled me. I lost my job. I didn't really have a place to stay, and my mom, as much as she wanted to help, didn't know what to do. She had made this desperate decision to leave me with someone a couple hours away, hoping somehow I'd recover there. It didn't work. I begged her to come get me, and she did. So we were on our way back, exhausted, emotionally drained, and barely speaking. I was sitting in the passenger seat with my head resting against my hand, looking out the window into the dark. It was a road I knew by heart. I'd driven that stretch so many times, I could picture every curve of it without even trying. We were coming up on the exit, and I remember watching the black sky and the silhouettes of palm trees sliding past. And then, without warning, everything changed. I didn't blink. I didn't fall asleep. 1 second I was looking out at the freeway at night, and the next, I was seeing something completely different. It was like the whole world outside the car had been replaced. Suddenly, I was looking at this huge open desert. Flat land, endless sand, distant mountains way off on the horizon. We were still moving, or at least it felt like we were still moving in the car, but we were no longer on the freeway. And it definitely wasn't nighttime there. It was bright. So bright it almost hurt. The sky was this harsh, unnatural white, almost violet white, like nothing I had ever seen before. Not sunlight exactly. More like the whole sky was glowing from within. I remember seeing a tumbleweed roll across the ground in front of me, but I didn't feel any wind. That detail has always stayed with me. And then, I realized there was someone, or something, standing out there. Not too far away, I saw this dark figure shaped like a person. It looked like it was wearing oversized clothes, maybe a beanie or some kind of cap, with long hair hanging down around the neck and shoulders. I say he, but honestly, I have no idea what it was. It could have been anything. What made it even stranger was that the darkness of the figure didn't look normal. It almost looked like fabric or smoke pulled tight into the shape of a person. And the outline of it was glowing with that same eerie white light as the sky. The figure was holding something rectangular out in front of it, almost like someone hitchhiking with a sign. That sounds ridiculous, I know, but that's exactly what it looked like. It was so strange and so specific that even now I can still picture it clearly. The whole thing probably lasted 7 or 8 seconds, maybe 10 at most, but in the moment it felt stretched out, like time had slowed down. And then I had this sudden thought. My mom is in the car with me. The second that hit me, I turned my head toward her, and just like that, everything snapped back. The desert vanished. The sky went black again. The freeway was back. The exit was there. The palm trees were there. Everything was normal. But when it switched back, I heard this sound. The only way I can describe it is like a vacuum sealing shut, or air being sucked inward all at once. It was quick and unnatural, and it matched the feeling of everything collapsing back into place. Then I turned toward my mom, ready to ask if she had seen any of it. Before I could say a word, she looked at me and asked, "Did you see that man?" I still get chills saying that, because up until that moment, I could have explained it away. I could have told myself I was exhausted, grief-stricken, sleep-deprived. Maybe my mind had cracked for a second under everything I was carrying. I would have had a dozen ways to rationalize it if it had only happened to me. But it didn't. So I told her, "I'm not saying anything until you tell me what you saw first." And she did. She described the same scene, the same figure, the same impossible moment. We never discussed it in depth after that. In fact, she refuses to talk about it at all. Every time I've tried to bring it up over the years, she shuts down completely. Total silence. And that's part of why this has stayed with me for so long. I don't know what happened that night. I really don't. I've had theories, of course. Maybe some kind of slip in consciousness. Maybe some bizarre shared hallucination, though I don't even know how that would work. Maybe something spiritual. Maybe something I don't have language for. At times, I've wondered about things like astral projection, or whether it felt like my mind somehow stepped into another place while my body stayed in the car. Because that's the strangest part. I never felt like I physically left. It felt more like my awareness was pulled somewhere else, like I was seeing through something deeper than my eyes. And when it ended, I had this powerful sensation of being pulled back into myself. I'm not someone who goes chasing paranormal stories. I'm not out hunting monsters or trying to make everything mysterious. I've always considered myself a grounded, logical person. That's exactly why this experience has bothered me so much. I can't explain it, and I can't dismiss it either. It took me years, 15 actually, to even talk about this publicly. Not because I wanted attention, but because I genuinely want to know if anyone else has experienced something like this. A sudden shift in reality, a shared vision, a place that felt real but impossible. Maybe there's an explanation. Maybe there isn't. But I've never forgotten that exit, that white sky, or that still figure standing there like it was waiting for us. And even now, after all this time, part of me still wonders what I was looking at, and whether somehow it was looking right back at me. Honestly, I used to be the kind of person who didn't really buy into paranormal stuff. I wasn't totally closed off to it or anything. I'd listen when friends shared their stories, but I'd never had an experience of my own, so I stayed pretty skeptical. Even now, I still don't know exactly what I believe. But there was one night a few years back that I still can't explain, and, to this day, it makes my hands shake just thinking about it. At the time, I was stopping by my cousin's house one evening to check on her dogs while she and her husband were out. I'd done it plenty of times before, and it was always completely normal. Same routine as always. I let the dogs outside, topped off their food and water, played with them for a bit, and turned the TV on just to have some noise in the house. Everything felt fine at first, really normal. Then, out of nowhere, this overwhelming feeling hit me, like someone or something was staring at me through one of the back windows. It was so sudden and so strong that I froze. The dogs started barking, and I called them back to me, but I would not turn my head. I can't explain it any better than this. Every instinct in me was screaming, "Do not look over there." So I didn't. I kept waiting for the feeling to pass, telling myself I was just freaking myself out. But it didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. I finally got the dogs settled back into their crates, and by then I was trembling. I remember locking everything up and hurrying to my car, trying so hard not to panic. The second I stepped outside, it felt like whatever had been watching me was no longer at the window. It felt like it was right behind me now. Close. I still refused to look. I got into my car, shut the door, and somehow the feeling followed me in there too, like it was sitting in the back seat. I grabbed my phone and called my friend Mara, because she was way more familiar with spiritual stuff than I was. My voice was shaking while I told her what was happening. She stayed calm and told me to say, "Nothing with harmful intent is allowed to follow me or enter my space." She also told me to pick up a cleansing spray the next day and clear out both my car and my apartment. So I did exactly that. I said the words, bought the spray the next morning, and followed all of her instructions. And after that, nothing. The feeling never came back. I never had another experience like it, before or after. I didn't even tell my cousin until much later, after they'd already moved, because she had a newborn at the time and I didn't want to upset her. What makes it even stranger is that this wasn't some isolated farmhouse or creepy wooded area. It was a completely ordinary neighborhood I'd been in plenty of times, day and night, and nothing had ever felt off before. I still have no idea what happened. I don't know what it was, or if it even was something paranormal. But I do know that the fear was real. It lasted maybe 10 minutes, if that, and years later I can still remember exactly how it felt. Like something was there, watching me, and like I absolutely was not supposed to meet its eyes. Let me tell you something that still gives me chills when I think about it. I live in a fairly isolated apartment building, in a quiet area away from the main road. There's always been this rumor that the fourth floor is haunted, but you know how those stories go. People say things, and most of the time it's just gossip that grows over the years. Not far from where I live, there's a highway that's seen some horrific accidents, including one major disaster in 2024 that shook everyone in the area. Ever since then, the whole neighborhood has felt a little heavier at night, like something in the atmosphere changed. Anyway, this happened one night in November 2025, close to midnight. I stepped out to buy cigarettes. The second I entered the corridor, I noticed all the lights were off, which was unusual, but I didn't think too much of it. I just walked toward the elevator. The elevator happened to be sitting on the fourth floor. I pressed the button to call it up to the seventh, where I live, and while I was waiting, I heard something hit the floor behind me. I froze for a second, but then I told myself it was probably nothing. A dropped object, maybe. Then it happened again. This time I turned around, and I swear for one split second, I saw this tall, unnatural shape standing at the far end of the corridor. It looked like a shadow, but thicker somehow, almost like smoke was curling off it. I couldn't make out a face. I just remember staring at it and immediately trying to explain it away in my head. My mind was racing, but I kept telling myself, "You're imagining things. It's dark. Relax." Then I turned back toward the elevator and glanced out toward the neighboring building, and there was another shape, just standing there on the rooftop, completely still, watching. Again, I tried to brush it off. In the dark, anything can look strange if you stare at it long enough. So I got into the elevator, went down to the ground floor, and stepped outside. That's when I saw a motorbike parked near the entrance. I'd never seen it before, and I know the vehicles around my building pretty well. What caught my eye was the number plate, 6666. Now, that number doesn't really have religious meaning where I'm from, so it wasn't some cultural trigger or anything like that. But after everything that had just happened, seeing it there felt wrong. Not proof of anything, just wrong. Enough to make my stomach drop. I told myself it was coincidence. It had to be. Then, a few months later, almost the same thing happened again. Same late hour, same dead, silent corridor with the lights out. Same elevator sitting on the fourth floor, like it was waiting. And again, outside, the same bike with the same number plate, 6666. Oddly enough, that almost reassured me at first. I remember thinking, okay, good. This means there's probably a normal explanation. This is just one of those weird patterns my brain is clinging to. So I left the building and kept walking. It's really dark around there at night. The kind of dark where you need your phone flashlight just to avoid potholes or not wander into the road. As I'm walking, I see 3 men coming toward me. Totally ordinary at first. Then my flashlight lands on one of their shirts. The moment I read it, every bit of relief I'd felt disappeared. I wanted to turn around so badly, but I'd already come too far, and honestly, I was determined to get those cigarettes no matter what. Terrible habit, I know. So I kept going. A little farther up the road, I passed a group of stray dogs I see all the time. They're usually calm around me. They never bark, never act aggressive. But that night was different. The second they noticed me, they started barking wildly, but not like they wanted to attack. They sounded terrified. They backed away from me, tails low, and then ran. That part unsettled me more than anything else. Because shadows can be explained. Strange people can be coincidence. Even the bike, maybe. But animals reacting like that stayed with me. So, was it all just a chain of bizarre coincidences? An overactive imagination fueled by darkness, rumors, and nerves? Or did I really brush up against something I can't explain? Honestly, I still don't know. And the strangest part is, beneath all the fear, there was this tiny part of me that felt weirdly thrilled. Like after hearing ghost stories all your life, something finally looked back at you. Maybe that's the creepiest part of all. So, this is one of those stories I still replay in my head, even now. And honestly, I hate that I do, because I never want to go through anything like it again. Back in 2017, when I was 22, I traveled to Germany with my friend Maya and my cousin Lena. The whole trip started because Maya wanted to visit relatives on her dad's side of the family, but she was nervous about going by herself. I told her I'd come along so we could travel around first and help her ease into being somewhere unfamiliar. Lena decided to join us too, which made it feel like this fun little adventure. We flew into Germany, then ended up taking a train over to Paris for a few days. We spent our time doing all the usual tourist stuff, wandering around, taking pictures, figuring out the train system as we went. It was chaotic, but in a good way. A few days later, we headed back and stopped in this tiny town outside Munich. It was the last stop on the line, and by the time we got there, it was close to midnight. We were exhausted, dragging these huge suitcases over quiet streets, trying to find somewhere to stay. Eventually, we found this small hotel and got put in room 14. The room had one larger bed and a smaller twin tucked off to the side behind a half wall. Maya and Lena took the big bed, and I took the twin. That first night, I slept terribly. I had nightmare after nightmare, the kind where you wake up feeling like you never really slept at all. By morning, I was drained and jumpy, but I tried to brush it off. The next day was actually beautiful. The weather was warm and clear, and the town looked like something out of a postcard. It was small enough that we clearly stood out as tourists, but people were kind about it. A few locals stopped to greet us, some practiced their English with us, and everyone was strangely warm and welcoming. We walked around, shopped a little, explored the streets. It felt peaceful. At one point, we even watched cows being led down the road, which felt surreal in the best way. That evening, Maya cooked us a simple German-style meal back at the hotel, and we sat there watching a storm roll in. Thunder, rain, that cozy, dim light inside the room. It should have been one of those perfect travel memories. That night, though, everything changed. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night and looked toward a mirror that reflected part of the room from where I was lying. I could see Maya sleeping. Then suddenly this pain hit my head, sharp and pulsing, and I heard this awful sound, like a power saw whining somewhere nearby. When I looked back, Maya was gone. The blankets were thrown aside, and on the nightstand there were a few personal things, but she wasn't in the bed anymore. I turned toward Lena. Same thing. That horrible sound again, the same splitting pain in my head. And when I looked, she was gone too. In her place was a woman I had never seen before. Blonde hair twisted up in a bun. She was lying there staring straight at me, and I cannot explain this properly except to say her face was full of hatred. Pure hatred. It was the most terrifying look I've ever seen. Then I caught sight of myself, only it wasn't me. I looked younger, blonde, frightened in a way that didn't even feel like my own fear, more like I was looking at someone else's last moment. And then suddenly, that woman was on top of me. She had her hands over my mouth and nose, and I could not breathe. I was fighting with everything I had, trying to pull her hands away, trying to shove her off me, and I remember thinking very clearly, I'm going to die here. I saw this bright light for a second. Then I was pulled back into the struggle again. Then the light again. And then I finally sat bolt upright in bed. My chest was burning. My lungs felt raw, like I'd really been suffocating. My head was pounding so hard I could barely think. I climbed out of bed and started digging through my backpack for ibuprofen. I couldn't find it, and I panicked. I dumped everything onto the floor while I was kneeling there, shaking so badly I could barely move. Then it hit me. Maya wasn't actually awake. That was the moment I completely lost it. I started crying so hard I could hardly breathe. I woke both Maya and Lena up, and by the time I found the bottle, my hands were shaking so much I couldn't even open it. Maya had to help me. She hugged me, got the cap off, and stayed with me while I took some. After that, I climbed into bed with both of them because there was no way I was staying alone on that side of the room again. I told them everything, every detail. I was so scared I wanted to leave that same day. They tried to calm me down and convinced me to stay just one more night since we had nowhere else arranged yet. But the next night, I refused to sleep in that little bed. Maya took it instead. And sometime around midnight, she woke up and came straight into bed with us. She said she felt like something had been pressing down on her chest. After that, none of us really slept. We waited for morning and left on the first train out of town. I've never had another experience like that. Not before, not since. And I truly hope I never do again. So every night, right before I turn in, I let my dogs out one last time so they can do their business. Lately, now that the nights have gotten softer and warmer, there have been more critters wandering around out there. Raccoons, skunks, even coyotes now and then. So I've gotten into the habit of standing on the patio while they're out, just to keep watch and make sure nothing comes too close. Our backyard gets unbelievably dark at night. There aren't any streetlights back there, and the porch light we do have barely gives off anything. I can see as far as the back fence, and after that, it's just blackness. The kind that makes you feel like the night is hiding something. The strange part is, for the last few nights, while I've been standing there, I've heard this slow, wandering whistle drifting from somewhere just beyond the fence. Not loud, not rushed, just this low, uneasy little tune in a minor key, like someone is absent-mindedly whistling to themselves. And it sounds human. That's what gets me. If it happened during the day, I'd probably brush it off and assume it was a neighbor, maybe Nolan from 2 houses down, out messing around in his yard or dragging branches or something. But this is late at night. No footsteps, no rustling, no porch lights on anywhere nearby, no glow from windows, just me standing there in this small half-circle of weak yellow porch light, with everything else swallowed by the dark. The whistling usually lasts maybe 10 seconds or so, though it always feels longer when it starts. And every single time, my dogs lose their minds. They start barking like crazy, racing along the back fence, circling, darting back and forth like they know something is there that I can't see. The second they start up, the whistling stops. And then everything goes still. Not regular nighttime stillness either. I mean a deep, unnatural silence. No dripping from the gutters, no breeze in the branches, no distant traffic from the highway a few miles off. Nothing. It's so unnervingly quiet that I find myself backing toward the door without turning around, because some part of me is afraid that the moment I look away from that fence, something will step out of the dark. I usually have to call the dogs in with Chicken, because that's about the only thing valuable enough to pull their attention from whatever has them so worked up. Once they're inside, I lock the door, slide the bolt, shut the blinds. But even then, they don't settle down. They run straight to the front window and keep barking with this wild, frantic energy, like something has circled around the house and is standing just outside the glass. And when I look, nothing. Just an empty road and darkness. What really gets under my skin is that my grandparents were raised in the Appalachian Mountains, and I grew up hearing all those warnings about hearing whistling at night, about what it means, about what you're supposed to do, and what you're definitely not supposed to do. I always thought those were the kinds of stories that belonged deep in the hills, not somewhere like this, not in a quiet neighborhood backyard. And the way it happens feels wrong, too. It's never already going when I step outside. It always starts after I'm out there, like something notices me first, like it's waiting. So now I keep wondering whether I'm supposed to do something. Maybe bless the yard. Maybe line the fence with salt. Maybe say a prayer my grandmother would have known by heart. Or maybe the only thing to do is stay quiet, keep the dogs close, and hope that whatever's lingering out there eventually decides to move on. So, this all started in the autumn of 2023, and for a few weeks, it happened so regularly that I honestly didn't know what to make of it. I never found a normal explanation for it, and then one day, it just stopped. I pushed it to the back of my mind for a while, but recently, I started thinking about it again. It lasted maybe 3 or 4 weeks. I'd be lying in bed at night, just about to fall asleep, and I'd hear it. One soft, unmistakable knock on my bedroom door. Then, after a pause, maybe another one. Some nights it was 2 gentle knocks close together, then silence for several minutes, then another one later. There was never any real pattern to it. The timing changed, the spacing changed. Nothing about it felt predictable. At first, I assumed it had to be my mom. I live with my parents, and my first thought was that she was teasing me for some reason. But that would have been really unlike her, and when I asked, she genuinely swore it wasn't her. What made it stranger was that her room is right beside mine, and she never heard the knocking at all. Just me. The second night it happened, I tried to convince myself I was half asleep or imagining things. So I stayed still and listened carefully, wide awake this time. And then I heard it again, clear as anything. I remember this cold rush going through me, like my whole body suddenly knew something wasn't right. Still, I said nothing and just tried to go back to sleep. After that, I started noticing this odd little routine with my cat, Milo. Every night, he'd wake up from the foot of my bed and start meowing to be let out of my room. I'd open the door, let him into the hallway, and then sometime within the next hour, the knocking would begin. Not long after, I'd hear him meowing outside my door, like he wanted to come back in. But once that started happening, I wouldn't let him back in. The worst night, by far, was when the knocking came with the sound of my doorknob rattling. That was the moment it stopped feeling eerie and started feeling truly terrifying. After that, I couldn't just ignore it anymore. Whenever it happened, I'd start speaking out loud, basically saying that I was protected, that I belonged to Christ, that nothing harmful was welcome near me. And every single time, the knocking would stop immediately as soon as I spoke or even acknowledged it. Then, after a few weeks, it ended completely. No warning, no big final moment, just gone. It never started up again. When I was growing up, this house always had a strange feeling to it, and there were plenty of creepy stories tied to that bedroom. I still don't know how much of that was real and how much was just childhood imagination. But this was different. This was the only thing that ever happened here while I was fully awake, fully aware, and able to say with certainty that I heard it. It was so weird. Honestly, it got to the point where my mom and I started joking that my cat was secretly turning into some kind of skinwalker every night. Part of me has always wondered whether something attached itself to me somehow, or maybe followed me back to the house. I wasn't in a great place mentally at the time, and I had only recently moved back in, so that's the only explanation I ever halfway came up with. I still don't know what it was, but I think about it now and then, and every time I do, it gives me that same cold feeling all over again. I've never really been able to shake this story, even now as an adult. From as early as I can remember, maybe around 3 or 4, up until I was about 10 and we moved to a different house, I used to see the same thing over and over again. It would always happen late at night, after everyone else had fallen asleep. I shared a room with my 2 younger brothers, but I was always the one still awake, just lying there with my mind racing. And then, it would appear. This dark, hooded figure would drift silently through my bedroom door, carrying something that looked a bit like a hooked blade, maybe even a small axe. It never rushed, never made a sound, and never once turned to look at me. It would just float steadily across the room and disappear straight into the wall that connected to the next house. I was absolutely terrified every time, but I never screamed. I never made a sound at all. I remember lying completely still, just watching it, because in my child's mind I thought if I stayed quiet enough, maybe it wouldn't notice me. The strange thing is, my parents still remember me talking about it the next morning. I used to tell them exactly what I'd seen, again and again. I was far too young then to know anything about Grim Reapers or anything like that. We didn't have books about it in the house, and I definitely hadn't seen anything on television. The closest comparison I could make as a child came later, when we learned about historical executioners at school. I remember seeing an illustration and thinking, that's it. That's what I saw in my room. For years, I tried to convince myself it must have been childhood imagination, that maybe I was half dreaming or just seeing shapes in the dark. But then something happened much later that really unsettled me. My cousin, who was born years after me, actually on the same birthday, had her own experience when she was around 4 or 5. One evening she was in the living room screaming in absolute panic. Her mom couldn't calm her down at first because she was so frightened. When she finally managed to explain what she had seen, my aunt asked her to draw it. And what she drew was almost exactly what I had seen as a child. My aunt was so shaken by it that she rang my mom straight away because she knew all about what I used to describe when I was little. Neither of them could believe it. What made it even stranger was that for a long time, people in their house used to say one of the bedrooms felt wrong somehow. like there was something uneasy about it. But after that sighting, it was as if whatever had been there was gone. The room never seemed to bother anyone again, and one of the girls sleeps in there now without any problems. I know how unbelievable all of this sounds. I've spent years going back and forth, wondering whether it was coincidence, fear, imagination, or something else entirely. But the fact that someone else in my family, years later, described and even drew the same figure, that's the part I can't really explain away. So honestly, I still think about it now, and I still wonder what it was. I've been carrying this story around with me for most of my life, and even now, I still don't know what to make of it. I've told a few people over the years, usually half laughing by the end because nobody ever really believed me. After a while, I started brushing it off too, like maybe it was just some strange childhood memory that got bigger in my mind. But deep down, I've never been fully convinced it was nothing. It didn't feel like a dream. It didn't feel imagined. When I was about 7, maybe closer to 8, I had a really hard time sleeping. I used to be scared of going to bed, though I honestly couldn't tell you why now. So by the time I finally did fall asleep, I'd be completely drained. I slept so heavily that once I was out, I was gone. Even now, I'm still the kind of person who's hard to wake. But one night, for no reason I can explain, I opened my eyes all at once. My bed was pushed up against the wall, and from where I slept, I could see straight through my open bedroom door into the hallway. Usually, everything was pitch black. But that night, the very first thing I saw wasn't the doorway or the dark hall. It was a face. It was right there, impossibly close to mine, only a few inches away. I remember freezing for half a second, then pulling my knees up toward my chest without even thinking. That's one reason I've never believed it was sleep paralysis. I could move. I know I could. And that face stayed there, hovering in front of me. I couldn't make out a body, or even the room around it. Just that face. It had this strange blue tone to it, almost glowing against the dark, like it carried its own color. Its eyes were yellowish, bright enough that I could see them clearly, and its teeth were this odd, shiny white. What I remember most, though, is the smile. It was wide and unnatural, almost playful, in a way that made it even worse. Years later, when I saw the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland, that smile instantly brought me back to that night. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember calling for anyone. I just remember the fear settling into me so fast that I squeezed my eyes shut and stayed like that. At some point, I must have fallen asleep again. Then, years later, when I'd pretty much stopped thinking about it, something happened a second time. This time I was around 10, and I was sleeping in my parents' bed. It was early morning, just before sunrise, when everything has that pale gray light. The shutters were closed, but enough light slipped through to make the room dimly visible. I woke up suddenly and, for some reason, turned toward the open bedroom door. Standing near the frame was a tall figure. It wasn't just tall in a normal way. It seemed stretched somehow, long and thin, with that same bluish color I remembered from before. And again, there was something yellow, around the face maybe, or where the eyes should have been. I can't say for sure, but I had the same immediate feeling that it was looking at me, and that it was smiling. I was terrified, but I didn't move much. I just turned away, pulled the blanket over myself, and shut my eyes like that could somehow erase it. Eventually, I drifted back to sleep. Those are the only 2 times I remember it happening. At least, the only 2 that stayed with me. But every now and then, I still think about that blue face, that smile, the way it felt so real in the moment. And I can't help wondering whether it really was only in my head, or whether, somehow, I saw something I was never meant to see. I grew up hearing this old story about the land my neighborhood sits on. Long before the houses went up, it was all part of a family farm. People used to say the farmer's young daughter, Clara, died somewhere on the property. It was one of those stories everyone knew, but nobody really talked about for long. As a kid, I never gave it much weight. It just felt like local folklore. But looking back now, I think maybe that story stayed closer to me than I realized. When I was little, I hated sleeping in my own room. I could never explain it properly, but I always felt watched, like someone was standing just outside my line of sight. Most nights, I'd end up dragging my blanket into my parents' room and sleeping on the floor beside their bed because it felt safer there. One night, I must have been about 10, I woke up in the dark and looked toward my mom. And there, right behind her, was a little girl curled up close, almost like she was trying to hide beside her. She was holding this old-fashioned doll in her arms, the kind with the stiff little face and lace dress. What scared me most was that it looked almost exactly like a doll we kept stored away downstairs. She wasn't moving. She was just staring straight at me. I screamed so loudly I woke both my parents up. They turned on the light, checked the room, and of course, nobody was there. They told me I'd had a bad dream, that I was half asleep and imagining things. And maybe that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. I never saw that girl again after that night. At least, not face to face. Still, strange things started happening around me as I got older. Small things at first, but oddly personal. Jewelry would disappear. Certain clothes that meant something to me would vanish for weeks or months, and then somehow show up again in plain sight, folded neatly or placed carefully where I knew they hadn't been before. My parents always insisted they hadn't touched any of it. Then there were the other things. My TV turning on by itself when the remote was nowhere near me. Lights flicking off and on for no reason. The kind of stuff that sounds easy to explain away until it keeps happening over and over again. The weirdest part was that for more than 20 years, no one else in my family really experienced anything. It felt focused, like whatever it was, it had chosen me. And I wasn't the only one who noticed something strange about the area either. Neighbors would talk about hearing a little girl laughing outside when there were no children around, or hearing footsteps in empty parts of the house. So part of me always wondered whether this thing was tied to the land, or tied to me. Lately, though, it feels like whatever this is has started reaching beyond just me. About 6 months ago, I was back at my parents' house, and the bathroom connected to my old bedroom was locked. No one had been inside. I unlocked it, walked away for maybe a minute, came back, and it was locked again. My boyfriend was there that time, and he saw the whole thing happen. A while after that, he and I were trying to leave through the garage, and the door handle just would not work. We both tried everything, turning the lock, jiggling the handle, pulling and pushing like idiots for several minutes. Then all of a sudden, it opened like nothing had ever been wrong. A month later, the exact same thing happened again, this time with my dad. And there's nothing wrong with that handle. It's never had issues before. And then tonight, something happened that really shook her. She got into her car, reached for her seatbelt, and the second she clicked it in, she said it felt like someone behind her grabbed the belt and yanked it hard. She spun around, thinking maybe someone was in the back seat. There was no one there. For years, I convinced myself this was just one of those unexplainable things that seemed to happen around me. But now other people are seeing it too, and that's what unsettles me the most. It feels like whatever started all those years ago isn't fading out. It feels like it's getting bolder. And honestly, I don't know what to make of that anymore. I don't know if this is something tied to a place or something that can stay with a person. I don't know if these things can build over time. I just know that after all these years, it still doesn't feel like it's over. So, I want to tell you about something that's followed me for most of my life. And even now, I still don't know how to explain it. I grew up in a neighborhood that had been built over what used to be open farmland. People in the area used to whisper that long before the houses went up, a little child had died somewhere on that land. I don't know if that story was true, but ever since I was young, my bedroom always felt wrong. I can't describe it any better than that. I just hated being in there alone, especially at night. When I was about 10, I had one experience that stuck with me harder than anything else. I'd fallen asleep on the floor in my parents' room because I was too uneasy to sleep in my own. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up and looked toward my mom, and there was what looked like a small girl lying right behind her, almost curled up against her back. She was holding a stuffed toy, just staring straight at me. I remember freezing for a second, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, and then I screamed. My mom jolted awake, turned around, and there was nobody there. Nothing. No little girl, no toy, nothing at all. After that, I told myself it had to be my imagination. Maybe I was half asleep. Maybe I dreamed it. I tried to let it go, but then other things started happening. As I got older, little belongings of mine would go missing for weeks or even months, and then somehow turn up again in my room, sitting out in plain sight like they'd been there the whole time. Devices would switch on by themselves. Not constantly, not in some dramatic movie way, just enough to make me stop and wonder if I was losing it. The strangest part was that it seemed tied to me. Nobody else in my family really experienced any of it, so of course they didn't believe me. To them, things were misplaced, lights were faulty, electronics were glitchy. There was always some normal explanation. But lately, that's changed. About half a year ago, I came back home and found the bathroom attached to my old room locked, even though no one had been using it. I unlocked it, stepped away for maybe a minute, came back, and somehow it was locked again. Then, a few months after that, my boyfriend and I were trying to leave through the garage, and the door handle just would not work. Both of us kept trying it over and over, and it wouldn't budge. Then suddenly, without any reason, it opened like everything was perfectly fine. Later on, the exact same thing happened again when my dad was there. My mom has even started noticing things now. She sent me videos of lights flickering in different parts of the house for no clear reason. And then tonight, something happened that honestly scared her more than anything else so far. She got into her car, reached for her seatbelt, and right as she clicked it in, she said it felt like someone from behind grabbed the belt and yanked it back. She turned around immediately, but there was no one there. For a long time, I really believed all of this was just random, isolated weirdness that happened around me. But now that other people are starting to experience things too, I can't shake the feeling that whatever this is didn't stay in one place. It feels like it attached itself to me somehow, and maybe now it's getting stronger. So, I've had experiences my whole life that I honestly can't explain. And over the past several years, they've only gotten more intense. There's been this strange spiritual shift happening in me lately too. Like something deep inside is being cleared out or rearranged. Along with that, I've been noticing odd little patterns, uncanny timing, weird coincidences, the kind of things that make you stop and wonder what's really going on. A few weeks ago, I noticed a damp spot spreading across my bedroom ceiling. At first, I brushed it off because the weather had been awful, and I figured there was no point reporting it until the rain let up. But a day or two ago, I looked up and realized it had gotten noticeably worse. I remember thinking, okay, I really need to put in a maintenance request. But I didn't. The night before all this happened, I worked late and stayed up until around 2:30 in the morning. The whole day had felt heavy, emotionally and energetically, like I was carrying something I couldn't quite name. There had already been a couple of strange moments that day too, little things that felt too perfectly timed to be random. Then, around 8 the next morning, I got woken up by the doorbell. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, but it kept ringing, and I realized it was real. So I threw on some clothes, still half asleep, and went to answer the door. Standing there was the maintenance supervisor from my property office, someone I recognized because he'd been to my apartment before. He looked at me and said he was there to check the leak in my ceiling. I just stared at him. Because yes, I did have a leak in the ceiling, but I had never reported it. I told him exactly that. He looked confused too and glanced down at the paper in his hand, then asked if maybe he had the wrong unit. So I looked at it with him, and no, it had my exact building and apartment number on it. I ended up showing him the damaged spot, and after taking a look, he said he'd come back once the rain had passed and things had dried out a bit. After he left, I immediately logged into the property portal, and there it was. A maintenance request had been submitted under my account the day before, sometime just after 5 p.m. I know for a fact I didn't file it. I wasn't even home around then, and when I usually submit requests, I include photos and extra details. This one was bare bones, just something like, repair ceiling leak. I started trying to explain it away. Maybe someone on staff had entered for some reason and noticed it. But that didn't make sense. Why would they submit it under my account? And if someone had already gotten into my place without permission, why bother creating a work order that could draw attention? What made it even stranger was that the request was marked "Do not enter if resident is not home." If someone had created it just to gain access, you'd think they would have selected the opposite. And the maintenance guy himself didn't act like someone who already knew anything. He genuinely needed me to show him where the leak was. Plus, if he'd wanted to enter without me, he easily could have tried. But instead, he rang the bell and waited like normal. That's what's been sitting with me. This isn't even the first unexplained thing that's happened in this apartment, and it's definitely not the first one recently. But this one shook me, because it was so practical, so specific, so verifiable. A real work order, under my account, for a problem I had been thinking about constantly, but never actually reported. I didn't file that ticket. So, last autumn, my granddad passed away, and not long after that, my parents inherited his house. They'd been trying to sell it for ages, and just when it finally looked like everything was falling into place and they'd found a buyer, something else went wrong. About 6 weeks ago, a pipe burst up in the loft and caused a huge amount of damage. Everyone assumed insurance would take care of it, but it turned out it wouldn't. A few days ago, my dad asked me if I could go round and have a look at the place, just to see how bad the damage was and give him a rough idea of what it might cost to sort out. I'm an electrician, so I said, yeah, no problem. My girlfriend came with me. The minute we stepped inside, the whole place just felt wrong. It was absolutely freezing, for one thing, but it was more than that. You know when somewhere just feels off, and you can't really explain why? That was exactly it. We started in the kitchen, then moved through into the sitting room. The house had been stripped out ready for sale, so there was barely anything left in there at all. Just empty rooms, really, apart from my granddad's old armchair still sitting there. The curtains at the front and back were closed, and there was this little lamp plugged into a timer socket, just to make the place look lived in from the outside. When we walked into the sitting room, that lamp was on, and I made this stupid joke to my girlfriend. I said something like, I can just picture Granddad sitting there in his chair having a good laugh at all this. The second I finished saying it, the lamp went out. Honestly, we both just ran, straight out the front door. We didn't even say anything, we just bolted. After a minute or so outside, I started trying to explain it away. I mean, the lamp was on a timer, right? So I told myself it had to just be bad timing. Creepy, sure, but still just a coincidence. So we went back in. That's when my girlfriend noticed a door standing open that neither of us remembered being open before. I told her we probably just missed it the first time, even though, if I'm honest, I wasn't so sure. I got on with testing the electrics, but my tester was acting strangely. The readings were all over the place, nothing steady, nothing that made any real sense. By then, my girlfriend was already saying she wanted to leave, and I was starting to feel uneasy myself. I decided I'd just pack up and go. Then I realized my voltage pen was missing. And this is the thing that really gets me. The house was empty. Properly empty. There was nowhere for it to disappear into. No clutter, no furniture, nothing. We checked the kitchen first. Just bare worktops. Nothing there. Then the bathroom. Nothing. Then we went back into the sitting room. By now, I was on edge enough that I asked my girlfriend to stand behind me while I looked around. I pulled the curtains wide open to let more light in. Still no sign of it anywhere. Then I checked the timer socket because I wanted to see exactly what time the lamp had switched off. That's when I noticed it hadn't switched off on the timer at all. It had been turned off by hand. I just stood there looking at it for a second. Then I switched it back on, closed the curtains again, and we went back into the kitchen. And my voltage pen was sitting right there on the kitchen counter. I'm telling you now, it was not there before. We had both looked. Properly looked. There is no doubt in my mind about that. At that point, my girlfriend had had enough and stepped outside. I grabbed the rest of my tools as fast as I could, locked up, and went round to the front of the house just to make sure I hadn't left any lights on. I got in the car immediately. From inside the car, both of us looked back at the house, and the curtains were open by maybe half a meter. They had definitely been closed when we left. I'm really not someone who scares easily, and I don't usually believe in stuff like this. I'm the kind of person who always looks for a logical explanation first, but I honestly can't explain what happened in that house that day. And even now, thinking about it, it still shakes me up. I've never really been someone who believes in the paranormal. And honestly, I don't believe in God anymore either, even though I was raised Christian. Leaving that faith was a long process for me, and once I started digging into the history behind it all, I ended up letting go of those beliefs completely. Still, even now, I can't say I've ever ruled out the possibility that there might be something dark or unsettling in this world. Not in a religious sense exactly. Just something. Some kind of presence. Because for as long as I can remember, my body has reacted to certain things in ways I can't fully explain. I get these intense chills in my upper body, starting in my face, running down my arms, sometimes all the way to my lower back. It happens when I think about powerful ideas, overwhelming moments, certain music, or anything that feels eerie or deeply unsettling. People might describe chills like that as exciting or meaningful, but for me, they've never felt pleasant. They feel invasive, uncomfortable, and they happen a lot, sometimes every day. About 5 months ago, I moved into a small apartment by myself, and ever since then, I've felt uneasy every time I walk through the door. The feeling hits almost immediately. It got bad enough that I set up cameras facing the living room and the entryway, because every time I came home from work, I felt like I had to check every corner and every door just to convince myself no one else was inside. I can't really sit in silence there either. I always need the TV or something playing in the background just to calm my nerves. There's one place in the apartment that affects me more than anywhere else, and that's the bathroom, especially when I look in the mirror. The second I step in there, I feel it. That same wave of cold unease, those chills down my spine. And lately, it's gotten so much worse. The bathroom is arranged in a way that makes it feel even stranger. There's a mirrored medicine cabinet right above the sink when you walk in, and off to the side, there's a tall standing mirror positioned so that I can kind of see both mirrors at once, depending on where I'm standing. I've had that mirror set up like that for months, and something about it has always bothered me, even before I consciously admitted it. I've always hated looking into mirrors when I'm alone. That's not new. But over the last couple of weeks, it's become so much more intense that it started affecting my sleep. I don't even like closing my eyes when I'm by myself sometimes, because there's this irrational fear that when I open them again, something will be there that wasn't there before. And the frustrating part is, I've never actually seen anything supernatural in my life. Not once. So I keep telling myself it's just anxiety or exhaustion, or maybe all the creepy stuff I've read and watched getting into my head. But then today happened. I came home exhausted and decided to take a nap in the afternoon because I've been so sleep-deprived lately. I actually slept pretty well. But when I woke up and went into the bathroom, the chills hit me the second I stepped inside. For the past few days, I've been reading other people's stories about mirrors and strange experiences, and it got me thinking maybe I should turn the standing mirror around. So I did. And weirdly, that helped a little. I felt just slightly calmer. But then I looked back into the medicine cabinet mirror, and all of a sudden my vision seemed to blur a little. That wasn't even the first strange thing that's happened recently. A few weeks ago, I had sleep paralysis twice in the same week, which hadn't happened to me since I was a kid. In one of those episodes, I was lying there, unable to move, when I saw my bedroom door open, and I felt someone, crawl into bed beside me. It felt completely real. But when I finally snapped out of it and could move again, the door was shut and I was alone. Not long after that, I saw a disturbing image online one night that hit me so hard I had to leave the apartment altogether. I'm not exaggerating. I felt so deeply unsettled that I couldn't stay there, and the feeling didn't really ease up until the next day. That's part of what makes all of this harder to sort through. Disturbing imagery really stays with me. It gets under my skin and settles in my mind, so I usually try to stay away from horror and anything too dark. Though, if I'm being honest, I'm also weirdly drawn to it sometimes. But even with all that, I still have never actually seen anything I'd call supernatural. What I experience is more like this crushing sense of dread, these physical chills, this growing paranoia that seems to have gotten worse ever since I moved here. And I really don't know what to make of it. Part of me wonders if it's tied to everything I went through before moving, the fallout with family, losing people I loved, being pushed away over my decision to leave my faith. That kind of thing does something to you. Maybe my body is holding on to more fear than I realized. Maybe this apartment just became the place where all of that finally surfaced. but another part of me can't completely shake the feeling that maybe it's something else. Something I can't see, but my body is reacting to anyway. And I know how irrational that sounds, especially coming from me. But when you're standing there, cold and shaking, staring into a mirror and feeling like you're 1 second away from seeing something terrible, logic doesn't always win in that moment. So that's where I am right now, trying to figure out whether this is trauma, exhaustion, anxiety, or something I can't explain. And honestly, I don't know which answer scares me more. So something genuinely unsettling happened to me the other night. I was staying over at my dad and older brother's place. They'd already gone up to bed, and I was downstairs alone in the living room, half watching some late-night show while stretched out on the couch with my brother's cat Miri curled up beside me. Then, out of nowhere, this really loud metallic clang came from the far corner of the room. It was the kind of noise that makes your whole body jolt before your brain even catches up. Miri and I both snapped our heads toward it at the exact same time. We just stared, waiting to see what had caused it, but there was nothing there. Nothing had fallen, nothing looked out of place, and the room was completely still. A few seconds later, Miri slowly got up from the couch, stretched, and jumped onto the coffee table. That's when things got even worse. She sat there completely focused, her body still but her tail making these tiny, rapid little tremors against the table, like she was intensely locked onto something. Her eyes were huge, and she was following something across the room. Not low to the ground either, at about the height where a person would be standing. And she kept doing it for way longer than felt normal. Just tracking something I couldn't see, back and forth, like there was someone moving around in front of us. I kept trying to explain it away. Maybe the clang came from the radiator, even though I've never heard it make that kind of sound before. Maybe she was following a bug, except it was cold out, and there really aren't many insects around in winter. And whatever she seemed to be watching was moving too smoothly, too deliberately. At one point, I finally said out loud, as calmly and firmly as I could, "You're not welcome here. Please leave." I love scary movies. I love ghost stories. I love all of that when there's a screen between me and it. I do not need any of it happening to me in real life. And there's one part of this I almost didn't want to admit, because even now I'm not fully sure I believe it myself. Before I said that line, I had stood up from the couch and sharply said, "Hey!" And I swear, very faintly but close, like right near me, I thought I heard a quiet, "Hey," back. That was the moment my stomach dropped. Later, when I tried to describe how Miri was acting, I realized it wasn't the usual cat behavior people picture. She wasn't flicking her tail side to side or getting playful. It was stranger than that. She had settled into this still little loaf on the coffee table, tail stretched straight out behind her, almost perfectly straight, flat against the surface. And these tiny, fast shivers were running through it. Her ears were forward, her eyes were wide, and she was staring toward the doorway beside the couch. Not at the floor, not at the wall, at eye level. Human eye level. And when I stood up and said, "Hey!" she turned her head and looked directly at the doorway like somebody was standing there. That's when I decided I'd had enough. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a weird house noise and a cat being a cat. But for those few minutes, sitting there alone in that room, it really did feel like something had wandered in, and Miri could see it a lot better than I could. Okay, so something strange happened again, and this time it was the radio. My dad has this tiny old portable radio, about the size of a grown man's palm. It's honestly a pretty awful little thing. The radio in his truck hasn't worked in ages, so every now and then he brings this one along just to have some background noise. The problem is, it barely picks up a signal and sounds absolutely terrible. So this happened really early in the morning. The house was quiet. My dad was asleep on the couch downstairs, and my little brother was still out cold too. I was coming down from upstairs when I heard this soft rushing sound. At first, I thought it was the kettle in the kitchen, like maybe Dad had gotten up to make coffee. But the closer I got to the first floor, the louder it got. And I mean way louder. Loud enough that I stopped halfway down the stairs and just thought, no, that's not the kettle. It was the little travel radio. It was sitting on the shelf in the dining room, blasting this harsh white noise. Not music, not voices, just that loud static hiss. And somehow the volume was turned way up. I just stood there for a second thinking, what on earth? Then I grabbed it and tried to switch it off. I found the off button, pressed it, and nothing. The static kept going like I hadn't touched it at all. It was still blaring, and I couldn't even figure out how to lower the volume. So I carried the thing over to my dad, who was still half asleep on the couch, with this ridiculously loud radio hissing in my hands. I asked him, "Were you using this?" Which, honestly, was a dumb question, because right above his head there's a much nicer radio he always uses when he actually wants to listen to something downstairs. He opened his eyes and just said, "What?" I told him, "I can't get it to turn off." Then he finally noticed the noise and where it was coming from. I handed him the radio, and he started pressing the off button over and over. Still nothing, just static. Then he handed it back to me and said, "Take the battery out." And I was like, "Oh, right." So I opened the little battery cover, pulled one of the batteries out, and immediately the sound stopped. Just like that. Then I put the battery back in, closed it up, and the display came back on showing the time, so clearly it still had power. But the noise never started again. And I'm telling you, I'm convinced it was the house ghost. That's what I call it now. I really think it was messing with that radio. Part of me wishes I'd stayed calm enough to actually listen to the static for a moment, just to see if there was something hidden in it. But instead, I got freaked out and ran straight to my dad. Afterward, I said to him, "See, that was the house ghost." And he gave me that look and said, "Why do you keep saying that?" Like I was being ridiculous. And I said, "Because you have a ghost." Then later, when I was telling my brother the story, I realized I never even checked whether the off button worked properly after that. So I went looking for the radio and asked my dad where he'd put it. Do you know where it is now? Hidden away in a drawer in the dining room, batteries taken out. So yeah, he knows. He absolutely knows I'm right. So this happened in the summer of 2007, when I was 17. My family and I were spending a few weeks back in our hometown. Around that time of year, nearly everyone would head off to the beach, so the town always felt strangely quiet, almost abandoned. Back then, my routine was pretty simple. Every afternoon, I'd go over to a friend's place and we'd spend hours playing video games, just wasting time the way teenagers do. Then later in the evening, we'd head to the town square, sit around talking about nothing and everything, and usually stay out way too late. That particular night, though, we stayed longer than usual. I think it was around 3:30 in the morning when we finally called it a night. My friend smoked cigarettes, but that was it. We weren't drinking, we weren't doing drugs, nothing like that. It was just another quiet summer night, or at least I thought it was. After we said goodbye, I started walking home alone like I always did. But that walk was nothing like the others. When I reached this narrow little intersection, I turned my head to the right before crossing, and that's when I saw someone coming toward me. They were only a couple of meters away. The figure was wearing a long, dark red robe with a hood, and they were limping slightly with each step. The whole area was brightly lit. There was a street lamp almost directly above us, so I could see everything clearly. And I remember getting this immediate, uneasy feeling. The robe looked old-fashioned somehow, almost theatrical, like something from another time. Then I looked where the face should have been, and there was nothing. Not a face in shadow, not a face I couldn't quite make out. Just darkness. Complete darkness where a head should have been. The second I realized that, pure panic hit me. My chest tightened, my heart started pounding, and I picked up my pace without fully meaning to. I crossed the street, and I kept glancing back, expecting to see it following me. But I didn't see anything. And honestly, that should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. About halfway down the street, I started hearing something call my name. Not out loud, not with my ears exactly, but inside my head, clear as day. "Come here, Danny." That's what really shook me. Danny was what only my friends called me. My full name is David, so hearing that familiar nickname made it feel personal, like whatever this was knew exactly who I was. The voice was soft, almost whispering. I couldn't tell if it was male or female. Every few seconds I heard it again. "Come here, Danny." By then, I was terrified. I started walking faster and faster, almost breaking into a run. And the closer I got to home, the stronger it became. This is the part that's hardest to explain, because it wasn't just a voice anymore. It felt like it was pulling my attention in a certain direction, almost like I could feel where it wanted me to go. At the end of the block, I had to choose. My house was down the street to the right, but whatever was calling me wanted me to keep going straight. Even now, I still think about that moment. I still wonder what would have happened if I'd gone the other way. But I was so scared that I turned right without hesitating. And halfway down my street, I heard it one last time. Then it stopped. I barely slept that night. I just lay there replaying everything in my mind, trying to make sense of it. The next morning, or really closer to noon, I was still in bed when I heard a scream right next to me. Not in my head this time, an actual scream. Loud, sudden, and so close it felt like it came from just inches away from my face. I froze. I've told people about it over the years, and most of them don't believe me. My friends never really did, and even now, people usually just laugh it off or try to explain it away. But I know what I saw, and I know what I felt. I'm 36 now, and I still think about that night more often than I'd like to admit. I still wonder what that figure was, why it called me, and what might have happened if I'd followed the path it was trying to lead me down.